Fiery three-eyed monster, resembling a dog, growled threateningly at the guild's light of glory, standing bravely in its presence. Nothing compared to the pleasure to start today's story with the guild leader Claude, with long dark hair, urging comrades to rush at the creature. But as soon as the creature made a move, a fiery breath burst from it, capable of turning them to ash, yet only a big man named Bobson stepped forward and stopped it with his heavy axe. The flame suddenly went out and Bobson was proud of his deed. He said the fire wasn't that hot until he felt the bottom of his pants start to burn, but the flame quickly died out when a puddle of water appeared near the burn spot, all thanks to the group's priest, a small man with glasses named Carl. Suddenly Dorothy, the only woman in the Witch Guild, decided to use her spell Casitas Freezing Hell. The next moment, a sharp ice ball was born from the air. It pierced the jaws and body of the fiery creature and pinned it in place, taking advantage of the moment. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Claude activated his skills and enhanced his black sword mastery, jumped into the air. Using the creature's body as a springboard, he spoke magical words and upon landing, with a single clean strike, cut off its head. He confidently remarked that even a magical beast was no match for him and again sheathed his sword after the fight. A voice came from the corner saying Claude had beaten it, but Leonard, leader of another guild, didn't even need to look back. He recognized Leonard's own voice. Claude complained that he was too slow, and Leonard only shyly smiled, scratching his head. When he tried to tell others that the remark was a bit harsh, meanwhile Leonardo laughed at Claude's comment, and members of his guild were not thrilled that Claude was sternly looking at the dark-haired man. They got even angrier when Claude repeated the same to their leader, saying he wouldn't be surprised if they lost to them in the guild rankings. One of Leonard's comrades even almost raised his voice, reminding everyone that today's quest was a joint mission of the two guilds, but their leader tried to calm him down, saying at least they easily defeated the monster. Turning away from them, Claude began to leave without saying that they should be grateful there were no dead around, and at the same time grabbed the hem of the black-haired boy's shirt. He is the main hero of our story, Fildo Electria. Other colleagues of Leonard appeared just as Claude and Fildo were leaving, and everyone was amazed. They did not expect to see other participants, no longer children, who seemed to glow in the radiance of glory. They wondered if all this time they were just holding back. Leonard confirmed that he was the leader of the group and that he did not at all expect Fildo to turn out like that. He noticed how Fildo sat behind a stone while his comrades were fighting, but Leonard said nothing more. In the tavern sat members of the Light of Glory party, raising their glasses to the further growth of their guild under the leadership of the charming swordsmen Claude and Bobson. He also noted how much their guild had grown, and Carl added that everyone's levels had peaked. He asked her if she agreed. Dorothy confirmed and wondered if other guilds could even compete with them. She savored the drink, then slammed it on the table. When Claude joined the conversation, he realized that their glow of glory was the strongest, and it was not only because of level or size. He noticed that Fildo might miss today's celebration, but when they realized this, one of them pointed out that he was the one sending their points to the donor so that he could complete his tasks. Claude looked at Fildo, who was just running errands for the guild and walking down a crowded street, checking the list. Suddenly, a man almost fell because of a box he was carrying, but Fildo appeared just in time and saved him, and with worry in his eyes asked if everything was all right. But the man only managed to thank Fildo before noticing that he was being mocked. Fildo ran away when the elder laughed and realized he had to become better. When he entered the tavern, friends laughed at his lateness and teased him about his weak skills. For some, these distances might seem short, but they still think this work is too hard. They remained silent when the one they were talking about began to be insulted, keeping their heads down. Suddenly Claude grabbed him and pulled him closer, asking if Fildo was upset, trying to cheer him up and saying how much his skills helped Claude. Claude insisted that Fildo not dwell on these thoughts, while Fildo himself thought they should be doing work instead of cynically joking and drinking all day. Suddenly Dorothy leaned to his ear and whispered that he had to do the job and deliver materials for the monsters, reminding him that they let them slip away, and Fildo turned his head with furrowed brows, wanted to say something but remained silent. The guild leaders tried to stop him, although they did not say they would at least give him a glass of water. But Fildo already told them he would return, and Dorothy laughed seeing how cold this young man was to her. Just as Fildo was about to leave the room, Claude called him and handed him a small piece of paper even before Fildo could take it. Then the guild leader spoke that Fildo was having a hard time with money this quarter. Many cuts were made, and although Fildo himself did not ask for anything, Dorothy noted how convenient it was for them to assign him points in the guild. He sincerely thanked Fildo. Their experience more than doubled thanks to his presence. Even the witch admitted that Light of Glory had become the #1 guild in the country, but Carl and Bobson still doubted their abilities. Fildo finally returned to his room, and fatigue covered him like a heavy blanket. He looked at his paycheck and began analyzing the statistics of their previous quests, noticing how their salaries were cut. Bob's strength as a soldier was tested, and he realized that only small change remained in his pocket. Looking at all this, he realized he had been basking in the glow of glory for several years, but his level had not increased. They knew how to squeeze everything out of Fildo to the last drop. He and the guild knew he had no other special talents except the ability to distribute and enhance the experience of the members, so he was usually hidden in the rear, and those who fought better were placed in front. If everything depended on him, Fildo thought he didn't even need a level, but suddenly a moment surfaced in his memory when Claude asked him to join their guild, and the leaders promised to make it the biggest and strongest in the world. Echoed in his head for a long time. Fildo thought that even he would no longer be able to stand beside them, but if he was lucky, the guild would crush him to mush. The next day, Fildo just stood there when he heard Claude say that he was no longer needed. The guildmaster repeated it, and Claude said to him without regret that he was no longer needed. With his mouth open, Fildo just stood and listened as Claude persistently repeated that he was fired, temporarily suspended, and thanked him for everything he had done. Fildo tried to object, saying he knew his low level but believed he had at least helped the guild a little by sharing experience. This time Dorothy responded. She stood right in front of Fildo, bowed, and said that this experience was no longer needed. Bobson joined them, saying that with such strength and abilities no one could compete anymore, and Fildo was just a burden. They took turns mocking him, saying that everyone in the guild was already at high levels and Fildo was at the lowest, so he was just a burden to the team. They told him to his face that he had no adventurer skills and added salt to the wound, saying his level of magic and swordsmanship was no better than an ordinary person, and when asked what he would do after leaving their place, another voice laughed and said the only reason for his low level was that he was not allowed to fight. Claude and their guild leader said that the guild members agreed to push him away and expel him, and Fildo could only silently bow his head and speak in a quiet voice. When he asked if this was really normal, it caught Claude's attention even before he took a few more bites. The one who had previously given points loudly asked if they were really sure they wanted him to leave. Squinting his eyes, a moment of silence hung in the room. Then Bobson, Carl, and Dorothy burst out laughing. The older man bowed and told Fildo that they had long made it clear they were not interested in him, but instead of talking to him. Fildo approached Claude's table and now found herself face to face with the Brotherhood's president. Fildo asked again if they wanted him to leave, warning that if he took all the knowledge they had gained thanks to his skill, it would hurt them, but Claude remained indifferent, and the older man, who seemed irritated, said once more that they were not some club and did not value those who did not benefit them. Upset, Fildo still tried to explain that his departure would hurt the entire guild, not just the four of them. Claude finally snapped and pushed Fildo so hard that he flew out the front door. His hand roughly struck Fildo's back while Claude mockingly called him by the nickname Low Adventurer. The other three also stood in the doorway. Dorothy reproached Fildo, telling him not to expect any severance pay, while Claude threw a heavy sword at Fildo because he was no longer useful to them. Yet they went on. When the door slammed in Fildo's face, one of the friends jokingly mocked him for telling the truth. He was left out in the cold in the middle of a snowy night. Fildo took his broadsword, activated the skill, and while everything crackled around, destroyed the ability he had shared with the guild. Fildo looked Claude in the eyes and said this was their last meeting. He would keep his word. He simply took back the experience he had lent them and did not look back. Fildo walked toward the Sword of Dark Night, holding it in his hand, and at that moment a beep sounded. His level rose. In the next scene, it turned out that they were in a pub, and the old man with a vertical scar on his right eye nostalgically recalled how perfect dragon meat was. Suddenly he turned into a true gourmet. He described the meat in such a way that it seemed not only dense and rich but also incredibly juicy, and younger Fildo almost salivated just from his words. Someone interrupted the old man. Someone was already yawning from boredom, but Fildo remained interested. Even younger Claude noticed how attentively he was listening, and said that if Fildo ever became an adventurer, he might be lucky enough to taste dragon meat, so until then he would have to keep trying. Later, Fildo woke up and realized that he had just seen memories from the past in a dream. Yawning, he still heard beeps. The boy even said that not even the commander of the Knights of Integrity in his country had that much. Seeing his stats, it was hard to believe that he gave all guild members that much experience. Fildo involuntarily thought, if only he had that much. So maybe now he could try all those things he had previously refused because of his weaknesses, as if the quest voice announced that he was constantly leveling up. But let's return to the topic. Fildo thought that maybe now it was worth joining the Night Order and rising in rank, and in general, it seemed like a good idea. Suddenly, a burly man with a scar on his face appeared from behind and laughed loudly upon hearing Fildo. Coming to his senses, he looked at him and said that he had been in the guild for a long time, admitted that dragons were difficult for them, so he doubted that a newcomer like Fildo could suddenly handle the creature. His expression changed and he asked if Fildo really wanted to test his strength. The receptionist got nervous and was about to remind him that fighting in the guild was forbidden, but our representative remained calm and told the elder not to do that. I didn't mean it that way. Suddenly the second crouched to his level and said he would break Fildo's nose before the dragon could, testing the younger's abilities. Suddenly the burly man jumped up and tried to hit Fildo. Younger Fildo managed to dodge at the last moment. Other adventurers loudly cheered. The fight flared up. Someone even tried to calm down and advised the burly man to treat the boy more gently. The receptionist asked if he would continue to test newcomers the same way since it was not the first time, to which the man smiled and said not to interfere in their scuffle. Then he again rushed at Fildo with a flurry of blows, mocking the fact that he could dodge attacks. When Fildo noticed his chance, he threw a blow with such force that the burly man fell to the floor. This shocked everyone. In the room, conversations buzzed. Everyone wondered if they had witnessed the battle of David and Goliath. The strong man still did not understand what had happened, and Fildo asked if he was okay, and it turned out to be the same boy who, most surprisingly, apologized himself and admitted that he was brought here because he did not expect this. The older woman looked at him and asked the question that Fildo himself had not noticed. When the receptionist saw those stares, she could not believe that a veteran adventurer could so easily end up beaten by someone like him, and even wondered who this Fildo really was, and then suddenly the one he thought of turned to him, surprising her even before the child. Bowing and sincerely apologizing for the trouble caused, he asked in more detail about the dragons, calming the receptionist and sharing the information she had about them. He told Fildo that as soon as they left the royal city, there was a direct road to the north which one could take. Rumors said that in the mountainous part of the Nautilus region dragons were raging, especially on a very important road, the very one the merchant group Fildo belonged to used to travel, which previously could only enter the Nautilus Mountains, and he ran up smiling because he knew where the dragon was, but before he could thank the receptionist, she, seeing he was going out alone, got scared. She rushed to call him back, warning that going alone was dangerous and that for such adventures they usually gathered a team. Unfortunately, Fildo was one of Spiddy's children, and he had already run out the door without waiting to hear what exactly was said. Suddenly the phone rang at the reception, so the administrator quickly picked up and listened carefully to the interlocutor, then said that Fildo had just headed to the mountainous area in the Nautilus territory, and confirmed that he had already started the dragon quest. He heard the conversation from the other side and was surprised. Fildo seemed to be connected with the light of glory. Understanding what had happened earlier, before hanging up, he also informed them that Fildo went alone, although he was very strong, and most importantly he was enjoying his first solo adventure. Simply irresistibly wanted to taste dragon meat. Bobson returned under the light of the Glory headquarters, leaned against the wall and watched the sword duel in front of him attentively. Suddenly young Carl approached and asked how he was. It turned out Carl was a newly accepted adventurer. He said their alliance was very good and Bobson smiled in full agreement, adding to the young man that the woman there was the real deal. From behind, even before his pistol touched her, she tossed a book into the air. She fired into the air and jabbed with the pistol. A few hairs on his neck caught him by surprise, but at the last moment he managed to avoid the attack. When she did that, he already clearly saw his next move. He struck his hand and a little below his opening. She counted the hits before pointing the sword straight at his chest. She loomed over him and knocked the wooden sword from his hands. For him, it was checkmate, but she kindly pointed out her flaws, saying that he showed 4 of her discoveries wonderfully, the 5th if you consider the first, and she acknowledged it while he fled. Claude confidently strode toward the opponent, boasting about his skills and even claimed that if the other was serious, he could kill him. The guild leader started with a smile, then began flattering and spoke with sincere surprise about Ed receiving the title Sword Saint, and his words were accompanied by applause. Moon, however, looked not very pleased but still thanked Claude for the words. Although the conversation was only friendly, her words still sounded pleasant. Dorothy watched the two of them, biting her nails and boiling inside. He asked Claude why he flirted so much with the sacred sword just because the sword was a bit more skillful, and it annoyed the sorcerer. It was terrifying to see how her mood suddenly turned into rage. She suddenly laughed, explaining to Carl that beautiful women are often unkind to each other, except to her out of envy. The pastor asked who said that, and Dorothy proudly admitted it was her words, but their conversation was interrupted when they saw Claude returning to them. The witch was the first to approach him and said how much she seemed to like the conversation with the holy swords. But Claude interrupted her and whispered that everything was bad. Leaning in, he approached and whispered to the witch that Lunasis suspects the absence of Fildo. Claude says that while trying to dissuade her, saying as if the giver is taking a break, and recalls how on the trip Lunasis said she wanted to see him soon, a person who could share the experience of a guild leader. He did not expect that the only reason he agreed to join their guild was that he was looking for Fildo, but under such circumstances he knew his excuse would not work. Soon Dorothy screamed in panic, asking what could be done, and even Claude admitted that at first they could do nothing because she held a piece from Fildo, which was supposed to bring the swordsman to the party, and this made her think about other steps. Dorothy refused and was almost having a tantrum when she was asked why she had to solve problems for someone worthless. Carl and Bobson continued talking indifferently, and Bobson, with a trembling he tried to suppress in his hands, admitted that he decided not to challenge the swordsman. This trembling aroused suspicion in the priest. Still looking at his hands, Bobson told him that he had a bad feeling, although he could not clearly describe it. The body seemed to be missing something, and the equipment was getting heavier. Suddenly, Carl interrupted him with an important phone call. They were stunned by the news from the priest, and they immediately called Claude and Dorothy. Carl said that Fildo seemed to be heading north to the mountains and planned to complete the quest alone, and Claude, looking at the news, muttered to himself that going alone north was unwise. But suddenly an idea struck him. Claude laughed maniacally, and Carl was left standing bewildered. It was then that Claude guessed why Fildo was no longer in the guild. So, this is how it all happened, he thought. During the vacation, he misinterpreted the light from Fildo Glor's point of view and believed that with the growth of the guild he would become stronger. Recklessly agreed to a solo conquest quest, but he was attacked by bandits and died on the battlefield, laughing to himself. Claude was even convinced that the story he created was plausible enough to present the greatest scenario to everyone. Dorothy began to laugh, buying Claude's story when he told her that this was their chance. People usually do not try to make such requests themselves. So when the story was formed, Claude wondered how to get rid of Fildo, but Dorothy reminded him, they are the radiance of glory, the best guild they could be. Dorothy agreed to join and said she would come, adding that they needed to be careful. Carl said that with the two of them appearing, Fildo would have no chance to survive. Because Claude was a magical swordsman of almighty glory, and Dorothy was a great witch with powerful magical strength. The priest undoubtedly believed that Fildo would die. Without wasting time, Claude ordered them to gather people skilled in hard labor. They set off to the mountains to clean up the trash. Meanwhile, Claude gathered his people to observe them from the inside. While the first swore to kill Fildo and endlessly talked about him, our local score-giver cheerfully climbed the mountain, imagining eating dragon meat in soup or as a juicy hamburger patty. On the other side of the mountain, the noise grew. The road was blocked, so merchants with goods were stuck and could not move. All the carts stood still while the fat merchant, Mr. Gonzalez, watched from the side and grumbled that the people ahead had not moved for several minutes, when suddenly another merchant appeared and ordered them to retreat, and Mr. Gonzalez asked if he ordered to retreat all the way to the other side of the valley, and then he was informed that a dragon had finally appeared on the road because there were rumors that it was causing trouble. The fat merchant darkened, his eyebrows furrowed. For him, this was the worst. He had a large batch of goods, and other merchants said that if this path was blocked, they would have to take a long detour and add 3 to 4 more days to the journey, and Mr. Gonzalez insisted that the current route was the most efficient to the mountains, and there were no other options. The merchants were preparing to take another route with horses and caravans. Some even thought of leaving part of the goods behind because the main trouble in these parts was that dragons attacked more often. People had been on alert for some time when one of the merchants informed everyone that he had contacted the guild for help, while only Fildo was jumping back and forth with a smile on his face. One merchant tried to stop him and warned the one who gave the task that a dragon was approaching ahead, while Fildo meanwhile began to attract attention, even Mr. Gonzalez, when the older man asked if he was a novice adventurer. The merchant added that the guild would send a squad for the conquest and that it was better to avoid this path for now, but Fildo replied that he was the adventurer who received the conquest request. But there was a pause. Only desert bushes rolling on the sand were missing here. Mr. Gonzalez patted Fildo on the shoulder and said that although he was eager to set off on a new adventure, he should not rush recklessly because dragons are very complex and frightening, and Fildo tried to convince him that he was a true hero, but Mr. Gonzalez explained that experienced adventurers are needed against dragons. Mr. Gonzalez suddenly faltered, noticed the crest on his sword, and his face instantly filled with admiration. He asked if he was a member of the respected guild, to which Fildo could neither confirm nor deny, but in his soul he told himself that he once was. The merchant, convinced of his skill, began to apologize to Fildo for his suspicion, because probably due to his youthful appearance he showed disrespect, and kind Fildo accepted the apology without hesitation, understanding that Mr. Gonzalez acted only out of concern, and also explained that they were carrying an important cargo: food, medicine, and clothes, which would seriously affect the people for whom it was intended. That is why killing the dragon was equally important for them. Mr. Gonzalez bowed his head and asked Fildo for help, and the young man agreed. Mr. Gonzalez told them that he went to where the dragon was. Fildo did not hesitate, he quickly went out to meet the dragon. Having done so successfully, he immediately analyzed the creature by its characteristics. The red dragon turned out to be of a high level. The monster, with a sword in hand, Fildo looked intently into the eyes of the mighty beast, but the beast only looked down indifferently and finally turned its back to Fildo. The creature reacted unexpectedly, and Fildo asked the dragon why it suddenly turned around, seeing something rapidly approaching from the side of its anxious surroundings. Rushing across the ground, the dragon's tail left a path of destruction behind it. But the voice of our boy was heard. What an impressive dragon! He was so surprised to see that Fildo came out unharmed. Despite complaining about his back full of splinters, when the dragon let out a terrible roar. Fildo became serious this time when he realized how strong the pressure was. Even his fingers went numb. Some strange thing shook him to the core. The red dragon did not hesitate for a moment and unleashed its fiery breath on Fildo. But the traveler instantly slipped behind the creature and surprised it with an action it had never done before. The red dragon swung its tail to hit him, but Fildo shouted that he had seen that before. The red dragon sharply recoiled to avoid hitting its own tail, then retreated, preparing to strike Fildo with its powerful claws. Fildo was already gone. The dragon, glancing aside, began to search for him. But finally it became clear that the adventurer jumped into the air and struck its neck with a fist. Although Fildo managed to sever the dragon's head from its body, the creature, unfortunately, remained unharmed. Its scales were too hard. Still, Fildo was insanely happy and, barely restraining himself, jumped up and down. He believed he had killed the dragon on his own, but what mattered more to him was the meat he so desired. Finally, Fildo looked at his boots. Something slippery slid under his feet. It was dragon's blood, and realizing this, he immediately wondered how to wash it off. Although he knew it was risky, the creature was still here, and suddenly he heard a call from behind. Turning around, he saw Claude, Dorothy, and several scoundrels holding Mr. Gonzalez and other merchants hostage. Guild leader asked Fildo threateningly, "Did you miss me?" Fildo could only ask why, and Dorothy replied that they had no choice. Their recruit, the Holy Sword, was looking for him. They say the witch asked in surprise why he simply didn't go with them, and they voluntarily agreed to go, but this angered Fildo, and he sternly ordered them not to interfere with him. Claude interrupted the conversation and suggested what they would do next. The guild leader said that if Fildo did not join, monsters could attack and kill the entire group of merchants, but despite the insistence, Dia persuaded Fildo to comply with the demands of the one who gave the task on their behalf. He could only cast an angry look at them, and meanwhile they took Mr. Gonzalez and others hostage. Dorothy spoke again. She pointed to an object on the ground behind that toy and confirmed to Claude that it was the red dragon. She was about to ask if Fildo had killed it, but Claude replied that someone else must have come and killed it even before their return to the destination. And meanwhile, the Federation leader informed Fildo that his adventure was over, and prepared to unleash his destructive machinery on the ground. But instead of activating his skill, Claude only furrowed his brows. Suddenly his sword became heavy, and he could not release magical power from it. Even Dorothy was surprised by what she saw, but then she decided to use her ice hell directly on Fildo, who, instead of enjoying the cold wind with him, attacked. Dorothy felt a strange sensation on her skin. Her eyes widened. She noticed with surprise that her most powerful magic suddenly did not work. Her hands trembled as she realized that at her current level she only had basic cold magic. Then one of the guild members shouted, asking Claude what had happened, and Dorothy was annoyed that Claude told her otherwise. Before she could hear the guildmaster's explanation, Fildo had already defeated them. Dorothy was annoyed by how careless Claude was. Claude attacked the young man with a sword, but one kick was enough. Fildo, getting up, tried to escape. He approached his former guild leader and warned him not to get involved with the one who gives points. He also added that he himself would do the same and forget about them. This angered Claude even more. Dorothy used even more magic and suddenly stepped between them so they could escape. Dorothy released her magical steam as a protective screen, and it worked. She instantly blocked Fildo's vision. Fog cleared and only the two of them remained. The guild fighters she defeated and the merchant with Fildo rushed to help her. The merchant asked Mr. Gonzalez if he was okay, and he replied that everything was fine, just a little wounded from the previous capture. He thanked Fildo, but he could not accept the thanks because he was tormented by guilt for dragging the traders into trouble. Mr. Gonzalez had already risen again, and his gaze was fixed on the dead dragon. He was explaining to Fildo that such monsters are usually brought to the city as raw material for making things. This specimen was put up for sale, but it would be inconvenient for adventurers to wear it, so the merchant offered to lend one of his carts, for which they bargained. And the crackling of roasted dragon meat was heard, and Mr. Gonzalez told Fildo that although dragons are a great threat, parts of their horns and organs have healing properties. The scales are suitable for armor, the claws for weapons, and the meat is considered a valuable delicacy. And among adventurers, there is even a saying that when you cook meat from a dragon, nothing goes to waste. The old man had no choice. He could only ask if everything was all right. The only thing left for him was to use Fildo to share with them his very valuable catch. They helped the adventurer to divide the dragon, and he definitely could not have eaten that whole mountain of meat himself. When Fildo said this, Mr. Gonzalez had enough. Even he could not contain his excitement, seeing before him meat of the highest quality, which was found only in these parts. Fildo bit off a tasty piece from the kebab. Fragrant spices burst into his nose. The meat was dense and chewy, and he enjoyed it more and more. Although the meat was hot, the sweet sauce gave such a rich flavor that it simply poured out with each bite, and the spiciness tickled the tongue as if it were a spicy dragon kebab. Mr. Gonzalez returned to him with a smile and asked how he felt, and Fildo caught the old man's expression and replied that he felt simply the best. The night merchants threw a loud party, and meanwhile Claude and Dorothy returned to the guild to discuss the previous matter. The merchant asked Fildo to return to the Royal Adventurers Guild. They were just handing over the dragon's tail to the receptionist. All the other adventurers meanwhile froze in surprise seeing him, and in the castle the king summoned the leader of Glory and his three subordinates, Claude, Dorothy, and Bobson. His Majesty, the eldest among those present, decisively took the floor and explained why he had summoned them. He wanted to clarify a few things regarding yesterday's events, in particular, according to reports, the destruction of the Red Dragon on Nautilus Street. Merchants who were there complained that they were taken hostage by Claude and other guild members, although the king added that there was information that they were later released. The king immediately got to the point and asked Claude if he had an explanation. Claude seriously replied that the king's words deeply disappointed him. His courage was unmatched. His Majesty stood with an unreadable face, and Claude reminded the king that their guild was famous. It was a pity only that there were those who pretended to be outstanding but still remained the most noticeable in the country. Dorothy was so impressed by how he could lie with such a sincere facial expression that she even suggested, maybe one of them could have done it. The former member and the king wondered why the guild had not done this. After all, he had already lied during his travels. Claude decisively informed the king that they were not there and had not attended council meetings for several days. Having listened to them, the king backed off from the pressure and sternly said that committing crimes in their name was a serious matter, but His Majesty also admitted that he knew about the guild's abilities, although many of their previous orders had failed. A few days later, he declared that as the guild leader, Claude must increase his followers and attract capable people to the guild, and the king warned that excessive confidence and negligence after recent events could lead to his downfall. This problem must be urgently solved to turn off the royal light of glory and inform them of any news so that they are prepared. Claude and the rest lowered their heads, begging the king to help with this matter. But his face was etched into Fury's memory, and she cursed Fildo. He was surprised to learn that this older man actually turned out to be the owner of a shop where everything is sold from jewelry to weapons and medicines, and Mr. Gonzalez remained modest, pouring Fildo more tea and snacks and saying that his shop was not of that level. Despite everything, he was very kind and even apologized for giving only snacks, but Fildo was still happy because Mr. Gonzalez thanked him so warmly. Fildo was just crunching on a snack when suddenly a man in armor appeared at the door and approached him threateningly. Although he behaved politely, Fildo was surprised when he asked about an adventurer named Fildo Electria. The one who served the food brushed crumbs off his face, and Fildo stood up to speak with him. Suddenly, the man apologized for the rudeness and, introducing himself not just as an ordinary soldier but as a captain of the royal guard, told the young man that he had come to take him at the king's request. Upon meeting Fildo, he added that rumors say, supposedly Fildo was given a reward as the one who first killed the dragon. This threw Fildo into a panic and made him want to reject everything, but suddenly Mr. Gonzalez's hand covered his mouth and his plump face leaned toward Fildo. He warned Fildo that refusing the king's gifts is very rude. Hearing this, Fildo turned to the captain, who gave him a cold smile. So frightened, the traveler humbly accepted his offer. Soon Fildo found himself in the royal palace, in the very presence of the king at the moment when the captain introduced him to His Majesty. His Majesty watched Fildo intently, and he in response glanced back, barely flinching. Suddenly, the old man smiled contentedly. As soon as Fildo the traveler who killed the dragon met the king, he bowed his head in greeting, but the king waved it off, saying no formalities were needed, especially since this young man had managed to tame the red dragon that roamed the streets. The king admitted that it was difficult for them to protect the roads and supplies of the kingdom from dragons, and called Fildo a hero for this. Although Fildo was grateful, at first only one thought spun in his head: to eat the dragon meat. In panic, he told the king that he could not accept gold coins, but the king did not let him go home without a reward. He even thought of giving Fildo one of his estates and directly asked if he wanted it. When he was offered to become a lord, Fildo only smiled and waved it off. Suddenly, the traveler became serious and told the king that although he was very grateful for the offer, Fildo felt that if he were really given this territory, he would not be able to manage it. He wanted to travel the world and gain experience. Though sad, the king allowed Fildo to leave and gave him a helping hand. Fildo thanked him and, when their meeting ended, met the captain near the gates. He already knows about Fildo's experience and his talent in spreading and would be glad if he stayed in the country. So he was embarrassed because Fildo decided not to go, and instantly Fildo felt goosebumps. He realized that the king was actually cunning, although he should have been glad about it because the king is the highest authority in the country. Fildo decided to keep these thoughts to himself, and now he was most concerned about the monetary gift he was given. He had never before received so much, not only from the Union but from the entire state. Honestly, with this money he could buy everything he needed, but now he could not think of anything she could buy with such money. Now he begins to think about it. Fildo thinks of buying better equipment because he needs to look like an adventurer. In the end, Fildo decided to return briefly to Mr. Gonzalez, not noticing him behind himself at all. Suddenly, Lunasis swung the sacred sword and struck the unconscious Fildo. Only at the last moment did Fildo realize that Lunasis had jumped to him and threw herself into his arms, a smile shining on her face. Fildo not only froze, she also blushed. The sword of the saints did not quiet down. She said she knew it was him all this time and that he had long dreamed of meeting her, and Fildo at that moment could only complain about how the armor on his chest hurt. Lunasis did not listen and continued to talk about how long she had waited with the guild, and Fildo did not listen, and when he began to ask the guild members, they only replied that the donor was still on vacation, so Fildo panicked even more from the crowd's gaze. But finally, the famous saint of the sword let him go after making sure that he was the same adventurer from the great guild over there. They did not know at first, but when he called her by name, she smiled warmly. She admitted that she had always sincerely respected him. Fildo gave up his own experience and devoted himself to the guild. Lunasis even openly told how she found out that all the achievements of the Light of Glory were the merit of Fildo, who worked in the shadows. When Fildo tried to calm down, he noticed that he was again attracting the crowd's attention. He called her back and said that she was no longer in the guild. Surprised, Lunasis immediately asked why Fildo was silent at first before telling him part of the truth. They made him shut up, saying they already had enough experience. They did not need people with useless skills. Fildo told her that he had honestly warned them, considering how Claude and the rest had kicked him out. Fildo coldly told Lunasis that now he was a free adventurer, he had many plans, he would decisively go alone and no longer belong to any guild. Lunasis asked again if he heard correctly that he was no longer in the guild, and Fildo firmly answered, yes. Without saying another word, Lunasis asked him to join her team. Lunasis left the Light of the Guild of Glory angry. Claude got even angrier because he realized he had spent a considerable amount to get in there, and quickly stated that what happened in the palace was unfair. Lunasis calmly explained that it was not about that, she simply did not want to join the guild without Fildo, apologized to the guild master for not saying earlier, and on her way back, informed Claude that she would return the deposit made when signing the contract, after which she left without looking back. Claude tried to call her back, but the silence again drove him crazy, and he wondered what was wrong with Fildo. I can't believe Claude still hasn't realized all their achievements are Fildo's merit. He couldn't fit it into his head, especially when Fildo was just a convenient amplifier, and suddenly the door opened. The office buzzed again because Carl rushed in. This time the guild members jostled around Claude as he came downstairs to see the commotion among his people. A quarrel broke out between two guild members. One of them instantly reminded him that he had previously told them that joining the Light of Glory would grant power according to their wishes. It used to be true, but recently even the guild members realized they had failed many recent missions, not to mention that these tasks were quite simple. Yet some adventurers still got into trouble and died, even being very skilled, because everything depended on what happened next. He told the guild leader that they might have to leave, which caused concern among many, and at that moment several injured guild members appeared and asked Claude if he considered their injuries a joke. One of them added that he had just seen the Sword Saint leave and took it as a sign to leave the guild. They are sure that because of the leader they will definitely part ways. Claude tries to deny it, but someone among them says that after Fildo left, strange things started happening. They all believed they were moving forward and recalled how Claude once said that joining the Light of Glory would make their abilities stronger. They also reminded the guild master that he himself said Fildo would only hold them back. The guild members also noticed how Claude constantly allowed Fildo to participate in more difficult missions and wondered what that guy was doing when they returned to the altar. When Fildo was asked about the Elven Land and the Royal Adventurers Guild, the receptionist only forced a smile and said she knew the legend. One of the adventurers who overheard told Fildo he had heard it from his great-grandmother, but the story turned into a tale about midway goblins, and when Fildo started asking others, they even laughed at him for believing in such fairy tales. Finally, he decided to go to the library to find out more, upset that people did not accept him. Seriously reviewing the catalog, he felt that information about elves was almost impossible to find, and even admitted to himself that all he knew about the land of elves was from childhood books. For him, elves remained a mysterious race, and although they never appeared in society, this did not stop him. His next goal was to go to the land of elves with the only book and investigate everything, because he remembered how this land always appeared in ancient tales and fairy tales, and this convinced him that somewhere there existed a race connected to them, although information about it was extremely scarce. He was so focused on his affairs that he did not notice the moon appear nearby until she asked if he was interested in elves. The sudden appearance of the elf frightened him just as she was about to close, and he signaled to be quiet. After all, they were in the library. They began to whisper. Fildo asked why she was here. She replied that she wanted to invite him to a party. Fildo reminded that he had already declined, but the Sword Saint remained calm, and she wondered if her presence here was appropriate and what would happen to her job in the guild. Lunasis replied indifferently that everything had stopped, and this raised Fildo's voice in surprise. The librarian cast a stern look at them for such noise. Sword Saint told him that the only reason she joined the guild was that she was following Fildo, but quickly changed the subject and asked about the book he was holding, hiding his face behind it. Fildo shyly admitted that he was trying to find the land of the elves, and before he could add anything else, he said he knew it was just a fairy tale. But the real feeling of adventure is to find something no one has ever seen and that Luna does not see. No kidding, this only strengthened her determination to join and made him suspect whether she was using the human wave tactic against him. They spoke so freely that they forgot they were in the library. She sincerely denied it, approached Fildo and said she knew the way to the land of the elves. Fildo froze in shock, and later they were both kicked out of the library. He sharply shook her by the shoulders. She became interested, and he asked if the elven land really existed. A spark of excitement in his eyes made Luna smile. Instead, Lunasis turned away and laughed, joking that maybe she could show him the way if they worked together. He felt only disappointment and slight irritation until he finally agreed to her offer, but she could not. Before Lunasis invited him to set off for the elven land. However, he quickly emphasized that it was only temporary, just until they reached the destination. For Lunasis, that was enough to bloom with happiness, and Fildo kept insisting that it was temporary without wasting time. He said they should smile when he finally got what he wanted. Meanwhile, in the guild, Claude simply could not believe what he heard. The leader's heart pounded as he asked the captain what his decision meant. They announced the indefinite postponement of all Eternal Glory affairs, and by this decree, any activity under the name of Light of Glory is strictly prohibited. His Majesty was very concerned after Claude's words, so the king ordered Claude to arrest those who deceived him, and the captain informed the guild leader that the guild would not be able to continue its activities until the issue was resolved. He strictly emphasized obey the words of His Majesty and warned that for any unauthorized actions, the worst will face even harsher punishments. Before closing the door, the elder man warned Claude, the guild may be disbanded, but that will not prohibit engaging in personal affairs. As soon as the door slammed shut, Claude threw something at the door that later disappeared and loudly shouted that this was the Light of Glory, the highest guild in the country. Carl and Dorothy tried to calm him down because they saw how much he was suffering, but Claude was busy trying to understand how all this could have happened if they had just kicked out Fildo and brought in the Holy Swordsman. He sincerely believed they could start over. After all, he still had friends. but suddenly all the guild members removed him, although he assured them it was only temporary. He firmly told Claude that he would look for another guild. The old man even stated that no adventurer would have ended up in such a dangerous situation, and apologized for leaving so suddenly. Bobson, losing his composure, grabbed the old man by the collar and shouted at them that they had long since let go of the light of glory. And suddenly a fist hit Bobson's cheek, sending him flying to the other end of the room just at the moment when the older man turned his back. Saying goodbye, Carl quickly rushed to his friend. He asked the large man if he was all right. Suddenly Bobson burst into tears in his eyes, speaking aloud about how much it hurt him, saying that usually he could endure beatings but not this time, calling for his mother and sobbing while Carl tried to heal him with magic. Claude froze in silence, watching how Carl's magic simply did not work. When he told the leader of their guild that he had no healing magic, the younger man turned to him with tears in his eyes. Something inside him had already broken as he saw his guild falling apart. Meanwhile, Fildo was up to his ears in his own adventures. He had just beheaded a fallen werewolf and glanced at two others who were scurrying about. When their eyes met, Fildo no longer pursued them. He was irritated by those creatures and doubted whether there really was an elven land in the middle of the forest this time. There was no noticeable path, and he wondered how Lunasis found it so quickly and spoke about it. The holy swordsman talked a lot, warned about wolf warriors and knew about some spring ahead, and Fildo thought it reminded him of a case from his past. He always knew where it was, but suddenly his attention was distracted by the babbling of a spring. Unexpectedly, it occurred to him that his friend had no weapon, so he instantly rushed to the holy sword to warn her that the werewolves would come soon. In spring, she was like the moon. She threw herself into battle with a battle wolf, defeated it with her bare hands, then went on to other matters and invited him to join the game. The creature was very frightened and finally darted away. But now Luna's attention was fixed on Fildo, who asked if he wanted to join her. Fildo blushed and admitted that he came only because he knew she was unarmed. Lunasis smiled gently at him, noticing how the traveler was worried about her. After thinking a little that Fildo was really nice, she changed the subject and asked if he was sure that Fildo did not want to go swimming with her, or maybe he did not find her attractive enough. And in a quiet voice, Fildo replied that the girls would probably be angry at Luna. The sword saint confessed that until recently she was insecure, but Fildo told her that he thought she was beautiful, and that made the sword saint immediately ask her to come after swimming. After that, the two of them set off further to the land of the elves with the information they had. At the end of the labyrinth, Fildo froze for a moment when suddenly someone called him, and finally he asked why that person knew so much about the land of the elves. Moreover, since their first meeting, she had treated him very kindly, constantly dropping subtle hints. Tired, Fildo said he could not imagine her as a person who would admire someone just because they did not put themselves first. Just as he was about to ask something else, a large wolf suddenly appeared before him and extended a paw. It seemed it was about to strike with its claws, but the person instantly drew a sword. Fildo was already about to rush into battle, but Lunasis ordered a retreat. His opponent was hers, and she would deal with him before the creature touched her. Fildo understands that she has her reasons, and if she does not want to reveal them, he accepts it. She apologizes for crossing his boundaries and in a quiet, gentle voice says that when the time comes, she promises to tell because she wants Fildo to know the real her. They head to the misty labyrinth where she asks him to take her hand and orders him never to let go. They walked silently, but he felt that as soon as they stepped into the misty labyrinth, Lunasis would reveal the truth. Lunasis became more practical towards Fildo and moved closer as soon as he tried to retreat. The holy sword warned him that once he got lost, he would no longer see other faces in the misty labyrinth, and leaving there with a furrowed brow would be dangerous, and Fildo, blushing slightly, replied to her that by her voice he felt the distance between them and that it was probably her trick to get closer to him soon, when she almost fell off a cliff. Fildo shouted to her that if Lunasis had not firmly grabbed his hand and pulled her out, she would have warned him to be careful in that area without ground. And Fildo could do nothing, only obey her orders. It was not long before Lunasis shouted that she had seen him. An elf from a tiny country that fit only on a plate held his breath in admiration, looking at the land that everyone considered the realm of the fairies. Suddenly Fildo succumbed to the excitement that flared in his heart, and as soon as they both landed near the entrance, the giver could not hold back and exclaimed that he had never seen such a beautiful place before. He turned to her, thanked Lunasis for bringing him here, and immediately added that he had to do something for her too. The holy sword ordered him to throw a party together with her friend. Closing her eyes, Lunasis asked if she could kiss, but he refused again, not noticing that two figures were spying on them behind the tall grass. This time Lunasis was determined. She approached Fildo and persistently asked why he would not give her a kiss, and Fildo leaned back so far that the crown of his head was already touching the ground when two finally ran out of the grass and howled wildly. When they were asked how they felt, two elf children Danon and Sana rejoiced upon seeing the Sword Saint. They took turns asking the Sword Saint how she was, and when she honestly said she was fine, they immediately began to inquire who the one next to her was, whether he was her boyfriend. The Sword Saint blushed when he had to tell them that they did not like such things. Fildo quickly closed all doors to any relationships and told them that they were just acquaintances. Watching how three women communicated, he did not dare to admit what he had really been all along. Luna finally stood up and told him that maybe she understood it too. The Holy Sword continued to lead him into the city, where Fildo had nothing left to do but watch its inhabitants in awe, especially the people of this place themselves. Giver with long ears looked at the men and women of the elven land and said that they were equally beautiful. When Lunasis admitted that he was not even sure about his appearance, Fildo simply shifted his gaze to the two other elves and suddenly realized how beautiful they were. When she was about to say something about Lunasis, she suddenly loudly declared that, in her opinion, Luna's level had probably risen. Everyone immediately exclaimed an admiring, "Wow." And when Fildo asked what she meant, Giver said that it was rare to find someone who could analyze, and now that he was in her group, his experience had only strengthened. Lunasis admitted that she had always felt that she would never become stronger than she was now, and he thanked Fildo for that, but Fildo said that she was already strong enough, and when he added that he was not finished yet, it surprised her. Fildo's face revealed nothing, and he noticed the coughing elves around them. Then he realized that many people were sick. Fildo asked if all this had not been too strange lately. Danon agreed, and Sana remarked that perhaps there was some forest magic or something similar here, and he said that the drying up made all the adults constantly fuss. One of them even whispered that Illumina had fallen ill a few days ago. Sword Saint and Fildo froze in amazement and asked who exactly, and Lunasis replied that it was her younger sister with better magic, adding that Illumina was the gentlest of all and he was sincerely proud of it. He asked where Illumina had been. Lunasis fell silent in surprise and felt gratitude to the one who had brought her here. At least now she could join the affairs that Illumina wanted, and since she herself was a stranger, loneliness did not scare her. This time two elf children wondered if she really was not Luna's beloved, but he quickly waved it off. They were disappointed, and Luna only smiled for a moment and became serious again. They set off for the castle, and when they reached the gates, the guards froze in surprise. The princess had returned. They wanted to stop her to check if the one beside her was human. She said he was her lover, but Fildo corrected that he was only an acquaintance, and the Sword Saint added that she was his guest and he would refrain from disrespect. They immediately went to the Great Hall, whose walls were covered with documents. X marks marked most of them with a moon sign, informing His Majesty, Lunasis Archelite has returned. The male elf returned to Lunasis and slapped her. His voice thundered as he angrily asked what she was doing and why she had returned. This man was the leader of the elves and a madman, her father, who tirelessly scolded her. He announced that he had passed all her duties as princess to her younger sister Illumina, and now Illumina suffers from the princess's ailment. Lunasis apologized, but the father's anger did not subside, and he demanded to know exactly what she was apologizing for. The elven princess resolutely said that if they continued to rely on the wisdom of the state, they would have no future, and that they had already passed the point when they could do everything themselves, so she proposed to seek a solution that they could manage to solve the current problems. He even emphasized that he knew this, and His Majesty also realized it, but in response the elder mockingly asked if she was ready to go that far. She had found a way out that the wise could not provide answers to the father. Finally he lowered his voice and whispered to his daughter that she must do it. Like pale elves, they asked the old man why. He again began writing on the board and informed Fildo that their magic was catastrophically depleting. The existence of elves is closely connected to the forests, from which they draw life force, and they believe that when an elf is filled with the power of the forest, a child is born who will grow up and restore magic on the earth. But recently the number of elves has sharply declined due to threats from outsiders. The magic of the forest is fading, and this exhausts the elves. Their life force and reproductive ability are falling. Although they live long, increasing their numbers has become a real struggle, so now people with powerful magic have taken on the duty to protect the forest, giving their strength for this purpose. Then they chose their princess to take on this role, the one that previously belonged to the first princess and now passed to Illumina. The elven king saw his daughter again and asked why she had left the country. In silence, the elf did not immediately answer his father. Instead, he turned to Fildo and sincerely thanked him for bringing Luna's back. He also said that this would allow Fildo to stay for a few days to honor his daughter. Then, extending his hand and sharpening his gaze, he called Lunasis to come and fulfill the responsibility entrusted to him. Thanking Fildo, he acknowledged that he had been by her side all this time and tried to use her power. Lunasis was tormented by guilt for troubling the people around her. She so wanted to show Fildo the beauty of her country, but just as she was about to go to her father, Fildo stopped her. Fildo promised them that he would save their country by his own efforts. He persistently emphasized that his skill was to enhance the experience earned by the members of his team, and all this enhanced experience belonged to him, so he could manage it as he pleased. She clenched her fists, and Fildo explained that their country lacked the magic to sustain the power of the forest. With his ability, he would forcibly raise the level of the elves, and this would restore the life force of the forest. The Elf King could only mutter about his extraordinary power, but Fildo was not finished. He added that the experience had not only strengthened, but he could also distribute it among people at his discretion. He knew the king might not believe him, but the very essence of the giver whispered to the old man that he should at least try this, placing his hand on his chest to save the country. Fildo looked at the Elf King with a burning gaze, as if asking the others to allow him to use his powers to save the country. As soon as their meeting ended, they immediately rushed there. In Illumina's room, she saw her, the sick woman, lying on the bed. Suddenly, she noticed Fildo was standing in the doorway looking at her. Lunasis came out with him, and they chatted a little. Fildo asked if it was really okay for him to be there, and Luna reassured him, saying that first of all, they should ask if something was bothering her. She began to tell that recently a tall woman passed by her who looked at her intently, and hearing Luna's description, Fildo guessed it was Lunasis's mother, and when he saw that the mother looked like a man, he himself found it hard to believe that one cannot determine an elf's age by appearance. Lunasis told her that no one from their country had seen humans for a long time. She gave her a sharp look, then suddenly apologized for any inconvenience she might have caused, and explained that to find a solution beyond the knowledge of the elves, she would have to leave the country and embark on a journey in search of answers. Until she finally felt that she was tired of it. But she realized that her powers had always attracted her, so she devised a plan to get closer to her by recreating existing relationships. Finally, Fildo understood why she behaved as if she had known him before, and at that very moment, when Lunasis asked why she was helping Fildo's country, she honestly admitted that she really had no special reason, and he said that if it had to be, he wanted to thank her for bringing him to the land of the elves. Although Fildo says that losing such a beautiful country would be wrong, he also understands that family and home are important, and sees that party members are in trouble, so they need to help each other. For him, that was exactly what it meant to be an adventurer. Lunasis only smiled softly and admitted that this was why his former comrades took advantage of him so much. They were about to argue when suddenly the king appeared and told Fildo that they should talk alone. He gave a sign to the people, quietly follow me, through the long dark corridor. Fildo was burning to find out why the king had brought him here, and without greeting, the king said that the sword he carried was almost at its limit. Fildo looked at the blade in surprise, recalling how it was used to kill dragons and werewolves, and suddenly the king ordered him to stop right in front of the large doors. Raising his hand, the Elf King seemed to hold some invisible thing in the air, and then the wheels started turning, and the door mechanism suddenly came to life. The king said that there was almost no one left in the country who could still handle the treasure. Now this place was empty. The next day he couldn't resist and asked everyone about the abilities Fildo mentioned, looking for where he could gain such experience. Fildo explained that to enhance the effect, one must target people with certain experience, and he already had a specific creature in mind. Lunasis added that there are several large monsters on the northern plain, and he can distribute the experience gained after their defeat. The Elf King understood everything but still asked if it was only he and Lunasis, because reinforcement from two people was far from ideal. Fildo frowned. The king was right, but he quickly added that they lacked group members and that the problem was also in constantly switching weapons, pointing to the sword before them. He approached the weapon, took it in his hands, and introduced it. This is the holy sword Excalibur, a hidden treasure passed down in their country. He persistently pushed Fildo, take it, and handed him the sword. He even added that he would entrust him with 100 units of his weapons, and one of the adventurers, stunned by this, told the Elf King that he could not accept such a great gift. But the Elf King only reminded him that in their country there was no one else who could handle this. He continued working on the long-started research but still found no solution. This time he knelt down, holding the sword with both hands, confessing to the younger one that he was ashamed he still could not entrust everything to a person like him. The Elven King begged him to save them and do it for the future of the country, and saying this, trembled helplessly. Finally, Fildo took the sword and accepted the king of the country. The elves offered to remake Lunaticus's new armor and come for it. As Gua said, 100 elven warriors awaited him. The captain of the elves introduced himself as Agat and told Fildo that their king had informed about the situation but did so not very confidently. Fildo explained that he was only an outsider, an ordinary person, and did not ask to be believed, but when he laughed aloud, he spoke differently. The captain calmly reminded him that there was no need to be nervous, it was an order. The race made Fildo smile a little wider, letting him understand that he was the leader of this squad. They insisted that before the operation began he say a few words, and although hesitating a little, Fildo still did as they asked. He addressed everyone. Although it might be hard for them to obey a stranger, he had seen so many wonders in this country and felt the kindness of its people, and although they had known each other only briefly, Fildo sincerely wanted to protect the fairy country and begged them to help save it. He hoped for the knights who supported him and raised the spirit of the army, told the warriors that the future of the country depended on their actions, and they, burning with determination, set off for the northern plains. While they were looking for where the monsters they had been chasing for several days were hiding. During the journey, the soldiers called Fildo and asked to rest a little. There were already many fighters on site. Very tired, Giver immediately went to the ascent to take the thermos and, grabbing it, took a sip. Praising him, the captain said that although she had walked a lot in the last few days, she had no shortness of breath even compared to many elves who barely managed, and this gave hope that they would not stand in the way if the situation required it. Fildo resolutely promised that, having that map, they would not go ask Lunaticus where they were now. Everything dragged on so long that involuntarily one wondered if the plains were still far away, but the princess declared that they should already be on the plains, and he swung the sword, trying to cut through. But suddenly he turned to Lunaticus and asked if he could cut through the ground, and this request surprised him, but he himself wondered why he had not done it earlier. Since the sword given to him was a treasure for the elves, Fildo could not allow the national treasure to cut the soil first, so the princess turned to Exiled and asked if she could do it, but Exiled quickly shook his head, and Fildo begged her again because he had already done it. Having no other choice, he finally began to cut the ground, and everyone waited for something to happen. While it was quiet, Fildo talked about how monsters hide underground, and suddenly the ground shook. Hearing this, Exiled called the soldiers to prepare but ordered them not to panic. The space tore and rushed down to the lower level, but Fildo reported that there was no monster there. This entire mountain ridge turned out to be a premonition of monsters. Fildo was right, the mountain shifted and began to roar. Between us it looks very much like Godzilla. Once a traveler came to a village on the plain and ran out of money from his travels. He asked one of the villagers to allow him to spend his money. Night fell on the quiet house, and the traveler began to wake up. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by strange rumbling and vibrations that lasted until morning. Then frightened villagers came out of their houses to see what was happening in the village. There were no houses, only he and Fildo remained. The monster army howled again, and Fildo raised his head in admiration. Lunaticus asked what the essence of this was, and the one who gave it explained that these monsters look like dragons only without wings. It was a dinosaur of the Rex species. Fildo froze in surprise. He had never seen a monster of such size before. Meanwhile, Fildo asked the captain how the soldiers managed to stay together in panic. Captain replied that fighting this monster was not a task for a few people. Fildo felt foolish for being so fixated on the next step in the battle with the monster, so he asked the captain, if possible, not to scatter the troops. The most important thing now was to make the monster focus before it moved, and only then to give Lunaticus the order to continue the attack. Sacred Sword unleashed a storm of blows. Cutting through the ground, the monster suddenly froze in place. It let out a deafening roar, and Lunaticus just watched, puzzled by what had happened to the creature. Fildo explained to her that the monster was too big and slow to feel pain, so bypassing it would take time. The monster suddenly turned its back, and the holy sword seemed to think it was not the one who did it. Not noticing their presence, Fildo sharpened his hearing on the loud rustlings. He clearly remembered how the red dragon behaved in battle, and without hesitation, immediately ordered Lunaticus and the captain to mobilize the troops and stand behind him, warning everyone that the attack would happen any moment now, as soon as their forces gathered. Approaching Fildo, the creature's tail plunged into a memory of a conversation with the elven king. They said that the sword was a treasure of the elven land. The king warned the adventurer that the sword was not for those without strength, but if it ended up in Fildo's hands, perhaps he could unlock all its power. So the king asked to focus the mind on the sword, and the sword would do the rest. Finally, the monster's tail struck, but no one saw if it hit Fildo with full force. New wounds appeared, and only then did he finally make sure that Fildo could finish it off, but the fight was still ongoing. Finally, he decided to hold back. Fildo rushed forward, thinking that only the light sword would work on the surface of the skin. He realized that he needed to think about other attacks. He jumped high to attack the monster, knocked it off its feet, and almost buried Fildo under a pile of debris this time. Giver was getting annoyed, cutting it piece by piece. It wasn't working. He had to strike the most vulnerable spot with maximum force. Suddenly, the monster threw him into the air, and just as he was about to fall, the beast was devouring Fildo, and Lunasis turned pale seeing it eat him. But the adventurer focused his thoughts on the sword and sliced through the monster's entrails with his new X-skill Holobreaker. When he managed to split the giant monster in half, the soldiers erupted in applause. But his gaze instantly changed when he saw Fildo rapidly falling to the ground. He became worried. The traveler could not move on his own. His endurance and magical power were exhausted. Not even a finger could move. Fildo, who was falling so fast, felt if he died now, it would all be in vain, but fortunately the elven princess Lunasis rushed to catch him. Reality hit. He pondered, does a too long life bring consequences that must be considered? His senses finally went numb and dulled, and he finally told Lunia that all of this was true. Although his wife tried to deny it, he quietly explained, artifacts created by His Majesty prolong people's lives, and they both had also used this. Those who did not give up, even their daughter Illumina, were saved by a gas that suddenly appeared. They were asked the question, where was the man named Fildo at that moment? The king of the elves decided to discuss whether they would accept him into the family as a son-in-law for the daughter who loved Luna so much. When Fildo spoke to the point, a slight surprise sounded in his voice, and the one who was giving was already leaving the land of the elves when suddenly he heard Lunasis calling him. He had forgotten his cloak. When she extended her hand, Fildo asked why she also seemed ready to set off. The princess admitted that she could follow him to prove her point, and he wondered how she herself would get out of that foggy labyrinth. Seriously bowing her head, she said that her country was still not completely saved and was miraculously beginning to recover thanks to Fildo's help, but there was still much work ahead to ensure that his country could rise on its own. Moreover, he was a little worried about his health because Fildo might be ill. He has great strength but often acts recklessly. His movements are so sharp that if he hadn't managed to protect himself, a fall could have cost him his life. Lunasis told him that she needed him to live long and healthy, and Fildo asked if it was because of his strength, but the elven princess simply replied no. It was because she wanted to be with him, even if only for a short time. She smiled sweetly as she said this and felt embarrassed. Fildo gave her permission to do whatever she wanted, but when he turned around, he noticed another figure next to Lunasis. They both turned and were surprised to see Illumina. Meanwhile, in the dark alley of Light of Glory, they were pressed into a corner, and rats were slowly sneaking up on them. Claude muttered that they had been the strongest guild back then, so why was this happening now? The next thing we see is young Claude playing cards. Suddenly, his former guild leader called him, and he immediately approached. The child next to the leader made Claude think. The older man explained that a few days ago he had taken her from an orphanage, and now they were working together. The man said that the guild leader entrusted the child to Claude. Claude just grumbled about why this guardianship was given to him. Other guild members laughed, congratulating him on finally having a little brother, and the latter just scratched his head because he had no other choice. Claude simply asked the child's name. As soon as Fildo's voice sounded, Claude suddenly woke up and found himself upside down. Bobson immediately caught him in his arms while Carl and Dorothy ran alongside. Carl finally realized that Claude had woken up, but others only shouted to keep running so they wouldn't be caught, and the guild leader in a miserable state could do nothing. His hands hurt and his face was burning. Dorothy asked if he had forgotten what had just happened while he was telling how he was bitten. He explained that they took the task through a simple request, but giant rats in the underground tunnel almost ate him alive, so due to the injury they had to retreat. When the witch attacked them, she was told it was her fault because she quarreled with the client, but her client objected and stated that if it weren't for the military police, Claude would have died there. Dorothy was still grumbling that she shouldn't have come here. When Claude himself took another adventure task, Bobson stopped him and reminded him that the first one was important, and when they reached their rooms, they were prevented from fighting. They were met by a scene of other adventurers getting drunk. She asked him where he found the dealers, but he dodged the details and told the young guild leader that as long as he was paid, he didn't care. And then, on the way to Dorothy, he raised a toast to the glow of glory and glanced sideways at those who called themselves parasites. Realizing that those people would stay here until their money ran out, they returned to their rooms, and meanwhile Carl began treating the rat bite on Claude's hand. Someone answered Dorothy that all the other guild members were helpless, like drunkards, while Carl focused on the guild leader's wound, and Dorothy thought that it seemed nothing worked at all. Bobson complained that despite all this, they all tried as best they could, and the witch only looked at her hand, fully realizing that their powers were exhausted and they had returned to their original abilities. Meanwhile, Carl had already managed to stop the bleeding in the claw, but more serious bandaging and treatment requiring more effort would have to be done in the medical clinic. Meanwhile, Dorothy still complains and gets increasingly irritated when she remembers that Chloe always said then, "If you are at the beginner level, you can level up again," and he grumbled that all this time they tried to break through by force and even forgot how to fight as adventurers. She added that exterminating rats for a novice adventurer should be an easy task, and when she aimed at Bobson, Dorothy began reproaching the man not only for being afraid, but also for shouting it was this that attracted the mice's attention. And Dorothy tried to justify herself by saying that now it wouldn't work like that and that once everyone was so strong, so they knew how to do it so well. She recalled how they had the most powerful support and almost unlimited healing spells that instantly healed any injury. But now everything is different. To prove her point, she pointed to the baseball bat she was holding and said that this was the only thing she could handle in her current state. Bobson asked them what exactly she should be comfortable with, and at that moment Carl remembered that the old man never really had a strong will. Dorothy reminded them that the guild had overdue taxes and, by her estimates, also salaries owed to members. The longer they delayed, the greater the debts would accumulate. She told them that soon the state would order them to disband and forcibly break the union. She was confident that this would significantly reduce problematic loans and the party that glow of glory would finally end. Carl recognized that gloomy silence back when the guild was still thriving and thought it would last forever, but unexpectedly everything ended so sadly. Dorothy replied that if Carl had said that back when things were going well for them, others would have. They would have laughed at him. Her wit made others laugh even before Claude finally spoke. He insisted that it was not the end yet, then continued his story about how the light of glory can start from zero. Bildo's group returned safely. The elves joyfully celebrated their return and in gratitude declared a national holiday. Exhausted but relieved, Phil thanked the elves and was escorted to the palace hot springs. He bathed alone in the quiet waters, enchanted by the luxurious elven architecture and the incredible beauty of nature. Steam embraced him. He learned how the elves dried clothes using heat from beneath the ground near stone surfaces. And Ilumina served him sweet forest water. Fildo finally relaxed, his body silently healing. Although Phil seemed relaxed, she suddenly burst into the bathroom, frightening him and everyone nearby. Illumina approached Phil, albeit shyly, offering to wash his back, unsure if she was being intrusive. Feeling insecure about her body, she explained her gratitude and sincerely wanted to thank him. Her sister Lunasia noticed them together and rushed inside, confused and clearly embarrassed by the situation. She insisted on washing Phil's back herself, and in the steamy sauna, chaotic tension immediately erupted. While the sisters argued, Phil remained silent, stunned that both were washing him at the same time. Lunasia smiled, gently washing Fildo. He thanked her, still hiding his flushed, exhausted face. As his back was being scrubbed, Fildo recalled his noisy childhood brothers and sisters, shared baths, and relentless commotion. They remembered family warmth. Lumasia blurted out sincere words, then suddenly panicked, realizing what she had implied. No one had time to react, and Phil simply quietly fell asleep sitting upright, while the girls froze in shock and silence. Fildo, now honored as a hero, was asked to wear a festive elven outfit for the celebration. He hesitated, but the elves enthusiastically insisted, surrounding him to dress him properly. Although already fully dressed, Phil still appeared confused, captivated by the great hall and its elegance. He wandered alone, embarrassed and in formal attire, noticing how people looked at him with admiration and curiosity. Illumina appeared joyfully and enthusiastically praised his appearance, and her healthy glow clearly showed she had fully recovered. When Illumina thanked him, Fildo looked around in surprise and saw that Lunesis had suddenly disappeared. The Elven King approached Phil directly, sincerely thanked him, and allowed him to freely enjoy the celebration. He offered Fildo a reward for saving the forest much greater than he had hoped for. The king presented a ceremonial brooch, and this shocked everyone. It symbolized royal succession, passed down from generation to generation. He proclaimed Fildo the savior of the nation and promised that his exploits would be forever recorded in history. The king gripped the brooch, feeling the weight of change and the responsibility that awaited ahead. During the ritual, someone suddenly grabbed Fildo and pulled him, completely without warning or explanation. Lunas appeared, grabbed Fildo, and pulled him into a dance, insisting that the hero could not sit still during the banquet. Fildo asked about her press, and Lunasis admitted that she was worried she was the only close human partner. Meanwhile, the king noticed that Fildo was missing and with obvious anxiety on his face asked where Lunesis was. The king hinted that Fildo's role needed to be officially established, but Lunesis waved it off and called it a foolish joke. Lunesis challenged her father and insisted Fildo's power must remain his own, free from any obligations. The king acknowledged her position but warned, alliances require courage, not hesitation or restraint of feelings. Lunas grew tired of the king's politics staying with Fildo. She feels that her father has become distant to her. Elsewhere, the Order of Knights triumphantly returns, led by a huge, authoritative figure, the Knight Commander. Fildo learned that the Knight Commander held an elite rank, which explained his incredible level. He stunned everyone by using Analyze, a rare ability that reveals the power level of others. Friends gladly greeted Phil. This ability is not for combat, but will be valuable during the upcoming guild recruitment. Everyone eagerly asked about their levels. Fildo revealed that the Knight Commander's level is 68, which caused shock and envy. Although their levels were low, Fildo promised to share his experience and support his friends equally. That evening, the group suddenly realized that Analyze could produce far more unexpected effects than they had known. Someone noticed that his ability to transfer experience makes Filbo incredibly unique and at the same time quite risky. The team noticed that their experience began to grow simply because they were near Fildo. It seemed unnatural and frightening. One member passionately suggested using Fildo to create the best guild, while another stubbornly defended his independence. They decided to protect Fildo. He is still young and vulnerable. Others could easily use him. A wave of shock swept through the group when they learned that had fallen and suddenly died. Guilt consumed Bobson and he confessed, fell while fleeing from attacking demons. Fildo silently cried. He was told to hide his power or else he would be protected until death. He promised to honor memory by using his gift to create the strongest guild. When the emotions subsided, someone called Fildo and pulled him out of his heavy thoughts. He seemed to be in his own thoughts, but when they approached the distant castle, he calmed everyone. He was fine. Laughter erupted when the younger companion rushed forward, joyfully proclaiming his independence and youthful enthusiasm. The group reached the towering castle. This meant the next stage of their journey awaited ahead. Banished from the highest guild, Fildo embraced solitude and set out to the lands of the elves together with Lunesis. During the journey, he came across a strange lake in which mysterious glowing fish swirled beneath the surface. After a short rest in the village, Illumina joyfully examined a rare fish on the shelf. Enchanted, Illumina pressed closer, mesmerized by the creature's shiny scales and the aquarium's gentle glow. Lunesis gently warned her, these fish are sold not as pets. Aluminum is tied with a knot, and she was still enchanted. At the bustling market, Illumina curiously looked at accessories, while Fildo quietly recalled recent travels. A local merchant enthusiastically noted his transformation, saying that Fildo now looked like a true experienced traveler. Fildo admitted he changed not just with the passage of time but through important experiences and his inner growth. An interested trader noticed his sword and, sensing something rare and powerful, asked to examine it carefully. The master confirmed its origin, probably dwarven, and hinted at hidden enchantments sewn into its exquisite design. Fildo learned that gnomes are legendary smiths who imbue powerful armor with magic and forge weapons. Lunasis openly showed that he has strong ties with the land of the gnomes, a legacy from his royal father. Despite the strict dwarven customs, Illuminus hinted that the royal request might open the door for Fildo's visit. Illumina directly asked Fildo if he wanted to come in, and this completely caught him by surprise. Without hesitation, the group agreed to set off. Their next journey to the land of the dwarves officially began. Fildo encouraged the sisters to go into the city for reconnaissance, while he planned to check out the nearby shops. Lunasis insisted on holding Illuminus's hand, partly to protect her, partly because he felt genuine affection for her. Illumina quietly confessed that she was nervous around Fildo and how embarrassed she felt by his presence. Left alone, he wandered the city streets and suddenly a small, curious girl approached him. She inquired about monsters and adventures. Fildo modestly replied, smiling at her brave and sincere curiosity. At the Adventurers Guild, the group was warmly and enthusiastically welcomed by a cheerful receptionist. She admitted she secretly bought flowers for her mother's birthday and was afraid of punishment. Fildo gently reassured her, assuring that her mother would forgive and sincerely love this carefully chosen gift. He gently joked, taking some of the blame to dispel her anxiety, while the people nearby warmly observed their interaction. Fildo joked that he would call the guards, but seeing that the child took it seriously, he blushed and hurriedly apologized. Walking through the city, Fildo unexpectedly met the gaze of the familiar, threatening Claude. Fildo recognized him aloud. They stood apart and the crowd watched as if sensing an unresolved history between them. Mr. Claude mockingly laughed at Fildo's new life, recalled his past decisions, and teased him because Lunasis was nearby. He said that the guild had fallen apart, others had disappeared, and their once fearsome squad had completely disbanded. Fildo silently listened, chewing over the fall of the Light of Glory, once his loyal guild. Fildo felt Claude's appearance was no coincidence. Claude did not come to make peace and was not seeking peace. Fildo questioned him, but Claude's fiery anger clearly showed a peaceful conversation was out of the question. Seized by rage, Claude accused Fildo of his downfall, swore revenge, and rushed forward without hesitation. Fildo reacted instantly, grabbed Claude's blade mid-swing, and with an unwavering gaze, repelled the sudden attack with the power of resolve. With a shout, Fildo threw Claude back and stopped the assault before it escalated. Claude, coughing and bitter, again accused Fildo, claiming those actions were deliberate persecution and unforgivable betrayal. Covered in blood and not himself, Claude confessed that he only wanted to see Fildo suffer, nothing else mattered anymore. Suddenly, a voice sounded behind Fildo. A little girl turned around, worried about him. Frightened, Fildo turned and realized too late, she had unintentionally stepped into the path of danger coming towards her. Reacting instantly, Fildo shielded her with his body and at the last moment pushed the blade away before it could touch her. Without hesitation, Claude rushed into the alley. Though stunned, he instinctively wanted to chase after him. Suddenly, a trap was triggered under Fildo. The ground gave way and swallowed him into a twisting pit. Fildo woke up confused. The locals rushed to help him, and nearby trembled a frightened little girl. Bob, despite their warnings, Fildo rose, decided to chase after Claude even while wounded. Blood ran down his face. Fildo suddenly realized how serious his wounds had become. He barely stayed conscious, breathing shallow, hands trembling as shock overwhelmed him. His body convulsed spasmodically. The locals panicked, and only one man tried to calm him as the symptoms rapidly worsened. Passers-by called for help. Fildo collapsed even more, painfully gasping for air, and others rushed to find a doctor. Lunasis broke through the crowd. Guards were given orders, and she, worried, reached out her hand. Concerned, she clung to his side. Fildo's eyes barely opened, and Lunasis tried to keep him from falling asleep. Leonard recognized the symptoms of poisoning and handed Fildo a pendant, insisting that he press it firmly. A stream of healing power burst from the pendant, radiating strength as Leonard activated its saving magic. Leonard stabilized him. With determination, he prepared for any danger that might follow this near-fatal incident. He, barely opening his eyes, whispered with relief, barely realizing that his life had been spared for now. Claude suddenly broke free from their hands and rushed into the darkness while someone shouted his name. Fildo's eyes that widened in horror and froze from a memory that fiercely emerged from the depths. He woke up alone in a bright, unfamiliar room, his heart pounding wildly and his body and clothes were soaked with smoke. A sudden sound pulled him from his thoughts. Footsteps rapidly approached from the wooden stairs nearby. The stranger met him with a warm smile and immediately explained. He had changed Fildo's clothes when he found him unconscious. Phil really tries to remember the face of that man, but confusion clouded his thoughts and memory. Leonardo Leonard, the famous guildmaster of the Silver Blade Guild, finally introduced himself calmly and confidently. Remembering the rival guilds, Leonardo poured some water and explained that Fildo is currently resting in the infirmary of their guild. Swallowing carefully, Phil opened his eyes wide when he heard that he had been unconscious for a whole 3 days in a row. Leonardo explained that the poison was removed, but the damage to Fildo's body is still significant. Fildo, frightened, asked about the girl nearby, fearing that the poison had harmed her. Leonardo reassured him that she was safe, then changed the subject and asked what Fildo was doing there. While the medic examined him, he seriously explained, the poison comes from rare poisonous components at the monster level. The complexity of this poison stunned Phil. Most victims would not have survived, and such a deadly potion could only be afforded by the chosen few. Leonardo became interested in Fildo's strange endurance, which made him reveal his secret. He has the power to grant points. He could not understand why Claude abandoned the one whose abilities raised the reputation of the entire guild. His face darkened with determination. Unlike Claude's, Leonardo swore he would never reject Fildo. When Claude's name was mentioned again, Fildo sincerely admitted that during the last months while he was away, he had heard nothing. Leonardo exploded with the truth. Claude is wanted for the murder of 3 leaders, and this is completely unrelated to the recent poisoning of Fildo. Posters confirmed Claude escaped his obsession with Fildo and insane actions made him terribly dangerous. Leonardo predicted that Claude would return soon and leaned in to suggest a cunning move to Fildo. Without hesitation, Leonardo invited Fildo to join Silverblade, promising protection and a powerful alliance. Leonardo believed that joining the respected guild would be a shield for Fildo from possible revenge by Claudefield pursuit. Leonardo, though modest, strongly emphasized that Fildo's potential had already elevated guilds to new heights even before Silverblade could do more. When asked a direct question, Fildo froze. The burden of his decision was suffocating. Another guild member burst inside, aggressively promising wealth and titles and bombarding Fildo with chaotic persuasion. Hearing the commotion, several others rushed down the corridor. They were shaken by the tense recruitment scene. An elf in armor and a burly man burst in, shocked that Fildo had woken up again. Suddenly the room was filled with a huge looming shadow. Its shape was unfamiliar, and its presence immediately threatened everyone. He quickly calmed the situation, gently offering Fildo water while the others awkwardly retreated and watched. Several guild members entered confused and suddenly saw that Fildo had fully awakened and was sitting upright. The girl froze halfway, her eyes darkened with suspicion when she saw Leonardo leaning over the Fild. Not understanding the situation, she launched into an attack, shouting accusations, while Leonardo parried the blows with controlled precision. Sparks flew as she fired the crossbow. Her anger flared due to a deep personal misunderstanding. Leonardo calmly deflected the next strike, keeping his distance and begging her to calm down peacefully. Someone nearby sharply reminded her that weapons should not be carelessly brandished indoors during a peaceful conversation. Others held her back. The swordswoman defended herself and insisted passionately that her only goal was to properly recruit Fildo. Leonardo, laughing, exposed her hypocrisy, saying that she was also targeting Fildo when he was weak and unstable. He accused her of manipulation, emphasizing that previously she pursued Fildo only for his strength. Cornered and silent, she struggled, trying to respond while his words echoed in the quiet room. Leonardo suggested that influential guilds had likely noticed Fildo's power and spread rumors about his rare ability. He made his intentions clear and strategically recruited Fildo as a valuable independent ally. Hearing how Leonas reflects on his own actions, I could not shake the doubt were her motives really different. Fildo clung to the sheet, overwhelmed by the realization that both sides could have used him. Rising, he asked Leonardo to apologize, demanding respect for the one who once truly cared. Fildo rose in defense, vehemently rejecting Leonardo's accusations and insisting that Leonases is not the kind of person to be so easily criticized or mocked. Emotions boiled over as Fildo demanded respect. He stood up for Leonases's struggle and firmly rejected comparisons to Claude's betrayal. Leonardo's confident gaze wavered slightly. Her fierce devotion clearly left a mark he did not expect. Trying to lighten the mood, Leonardo joked to ease the atmosphere, and with a cheeky smile threw out an insincere half-apology. Others raged at his indifference, demanding sincerity, while Fildo bitterly laughed at the irony. Chaos flared up again when Fildo shouted he could not accept the manipulations and twisted assumptions around him. To protect Leonases, Fildo proposed, a double victory would force Leonardo to apologize publicly. Leonardo smirked and threw back a counter-condition. If he wins, Fildo will join Silverblade without any complaints. Despite protests, Fildo agreed to call it that, saying he only seeks respect, not gold or promises. Leonardo acknowledged Fildo's determination. His tone softened a bit, but pride still lurked beneath the smile. Burning with pride and rage, Fildo declared war and swore to defeat Leonardo in an honest duel. After a few days of rest, Fildo got back on his feet and prepared to accept the challenge his comrade had offered. Leonard smiled, full of confidence, swords at the ready. His sharp gaze silently testified to his resolve before the upcoming trial. Heads, they went out to the training ground one-on-one, knowing strength would be tested without restraint. The place was cleared, secrecy removed, all distractions in this duel, only focus and skill mattered. Inside, allies watched tensely and begged Fildo not to underestimate Leonardo, though they were concerned about fairness. Fildo was ordered to go into the duel with the intent to kill. His strength was undeniable. Despite his high level, everyone remained cautious. Leonard, leader of the Silver Blades, was a legendary paladin. Leonard confidently requested the signal. When his level 96 was shown, the spectators froze in nervous silence. A bright magical flash lit up the sky. It was the signal to start the wildly intense duel with high stakes. As long as you live, everything will be fine. When Leonard announced there would be no mercy, he lunged forward and instantly struck with a precise, explosive first blow. He definitely blocked Phil's swift strike, eyes sharp and unwavering under the heavy collision. Suddenly, Finally, Leonard counterattacked with incredible speed and forced him to retreat. He was stunned by his devastating pressure. Of course, they closed the distance again and exchanged blows fiercely, and he sincerely acknowledged Fildo's strength without any mockery. A challenging smile appeared on Leonard's lips. This battle completely exceeded all his initial expectations. Looking at the broken blade, he smiled. Fildo's attack finally left a mark, and he showed his true level 120 and confidently mocked his broken sword. It no longer mattered. Leonard admitted that he had held himself back before and now agreed he needed to unleash all his power. Fildo, without hesitation, took the high-class weapon in his hands and finally approached the fight seriously. Leonard raised a finger and proposed the decisive rule: one strike and the final winner will be determined. With a smile, he said, "One single strike and Fildo will win the duel." He knew he had the physical advantage, but felt that Leonard's confidence came from somewhere much deeper. Deeply, Leonard's sudden question broke the tension. He asked if Fildo had ever truly taken someone's life. Caught off guard, Fildo awkwardly admitted that he had only fought monsters during escort missions and had never intentionally killed one. He coldly warned him that real fights have weight, and this realization could decide life or death. Without hesitation, he summoned a fierce vortex of energy and calmly unleashed his true power. Leonard activated a speed buff, summoned Durandal, and suddenly disappeared. Fildo was stunned by such an unexpected disappearance. Here, like lightning, he struck Fildo mid-move, called him slow, and energy cracked the ground. When he was harshly thrown back, he realized, in such a fight, adventurers are truly tested not by numbers but by wit. Then Leonard swung Durandal with deadly precision, and his experience and calm were so strong that they overwhelmed even those honed instincts. Pressed against a stone wall, he trembled. He called him lucky, having to face only one person, not. Leonard activated Durandal's power boost and wildly charged at Phil, who barely managed to realize the approaching danger. A powerful swing sounded near Fildo's head. He blocked the blow at the last moment. Leonard acknowledged his reflexes. The paladin disappeared again. He retreated, staggering, eyes wide open, stunned by another impossible burst of speed. Firmly gripping his sword, Fildo tried to stay calm. There had to be some trick behind this. His sharp voice cut through the tension he already felt and easily filled those thoughts in the midst of battle. Leonard confidently said that Durandal could amplify strength, and Fildo doubted his honesty in the middle of the fight. Although he showed his strength, he still suppressed Fildo, proving that knowledge alone could not withstand his obvious advantage. Fildo resisted under the relentless weight of Durandal, but found no crack for a counterattack. Leonard approached again, relentless in movement. His blade pushed Fildo back into a shaky stance. Receiving a direct hit and bouncing back, he chuckled and casually remarked on his clumsiness and footwork during the fight. Worried eyes watch as the fierce battle unfolds, and Illumina with her ally Sans fight, but they are getting worse. A sudden explosion threw Illumina backward, and she screamed as shockwaves brutally tore the ground. Leonard apologized mid-swing and admitted he got carried away. Fildo barely managed to protect her from the side effects. Illumina cast the supportive spell Airwind to reposition. She could not believe that Fildo was losing so terribly. They instantly recognized his fighting style. His buffs explosively increase strength, so in pure power he surpasses Fildo. Observers realized that Leonard's adaptability made him dangerous and unpredictable, nothing like a beast. He could not decipher his actions at all. At the royal court, he was introduced as the head of the elite guild, Silver Blade. After the duel, he was secretly ordered to decide Fildo's fate so that no one would guess. Leonard silently stood over the wounded man, watching his shallow breaths by the window bathed in moonlight. The guild anxiously reported his critical condition, and the order was extremely simple: to transport him without risking causing further harm. Stretching with a calm smile, Leonard accepted the challenge. Tomorrow's chaos would begin with him. Though bound to the bed, the man remained alert. Misfortune seemed like a shadow pursuing his name, and this was not the end. Sasani nearby argued about the orders. Quietly removing him could solve everything or push towards an even greater war. Rumors about the leadership of Claude Strix spread. No one could believe he would expel such a devoted person. The sudden exile of Fildo stunned everyone. No rules, no explanations, so the reason was hidden much deeper. Rumors spread whether she was mistaken or deliberately planned something bigger by releasing Fildo so suddenly. Suddenly, Leonard Midot had a wild theory flare up, and he nervously smiled, refusing to explain while the tension grew. Despite protests, his plan took root, although he himself regretted coming up with such a reckless idea. Leonard was considering options. Inviting Fildo, despite everything, could completely change the future of the guild. The group argued tensely and cautiously. Sheer strength alone would not realize his plan. Attitude and loyalty mattered, and all of that rested on you. A smile on his face sharpened. If Fildo became dangerous, they would neutralize him without hesitation. Others also felt the same fatigue. Unfortunately, facing threats stronger than oneself had become part of survival. Mari was trembling, her voice breaking. Fildo's potential was not just strong, it was truly frightening to imagine. The duel began without any mercy. Phil crossed blades and stunned the opponent with incredible speed. Everyone watching was filled with disbelief, their eyes widened. His strength far exceeded all expectations. The deadly counterattack came instantly, but Phil reacted instinctively and barely avoided the cutting blade. Steel met steel, their blades locked, and neither fighter was going to retreat. Now dodging upward, she struck fiercely. Phil stepped back a step, feeling the force of each attack. The blow threw Phil backward. She rolled over dust and grass, stunned by the forces. The opponent froze in the middle of the stance, realizing the blow was stronger than planned, and anxiety ran across his face. He appeared from among the bushes, bruised, breathless, but still ready to acknowledge her strength. Leonard responded sincerely and explained that he truly meant the compliment, while Phil, still confused, could not tell if it was irony. Although it hurt, he held on. The injury was not critical, and he had not yet used all his strength. He noticed how sharply Fildo perceived the world. The boy's eyes caught movements that others did not even notice. Phil studied Leonard's fighting style. The key was how he switched enhancement modes during a strike. As long as he remained focused, he believed he could match Leonard's changing rhythm. Time decides everything, thought Phil, ready to strike during the Hymex shift when physical enhancement occurred. Noticing a weak spot, he lunged forward. If he was not mistaken, the next hit would land. Phil stopped the strike just a few centimeters away. Leonard noticed the restraint and, narrowing his eyes, scrutinized him carefully. Although he restrained himself, he was still labeled soft, and the opponent began testing this without hesitation. A sudden counterattack caught him off guard and reminded him that the duel was not over yet. Pin. Pressed down and disarmed, he was interrogated. It was clear that the gear itself would not save him in real fights. Leonard set a simple rule: one clean strike and victory. There would be no mercy here. The enemy suddenly attacked. He and Fildo jumped back, and the yard crackled with tension. Fildo, gripping his sword, saw unclearly, his vision blurred after the previous clash. Although struggling, the opponent did not give up. He relied on brute force to keep fighting. Fildo tried to retreat, to reconsider everything once more, but his legs gave way under the pressure of movement. Leonard threw a blinding strike, and when vision blurred, any attempt to respond became impossible. With bruises but unbroken, he surged forward and did not give up, despite the overwhelming odds ahead. Thinking about forbidden techniques, he hesitated. Some skills were too dangerous to use in crowded places. He realized that Leonard would act instantly without hesitation, having already decided to fight or retreat. Respect grew, and Phil did see value in it. Joining his guild might not be such a foolish step after all. Despite admiration, he did not succumb. His own goals burned stronger than fear and pain. Water exploded around him. Fildo rapidly adjusted, eyes fixed on Leonard's position on the opposite side of the field. The opening will work in the middle of the chart. He is ready for the last bet, channeling his second X skill. Raising the sword, he released Avalon, defending himself while the holy energy flooded the battlefield. A memory emerges, trapped in routine work, unnoticed and forgotten. It longs for something more than just passive survival. Now his determination was clear. That powerless version of himself needed to be left behind. Although Phil loudly shouted his true desire, Leonard, smiling gently, acknowledged his will as worthy of respect. Both fighters rushed simultaneously. Their blades clashed, guided by conviction, not just brute force. The young girl runs into the great guild hall, urgently searching for her brother to find out where he is. Inside, she learns from one of the members Fildo is not currently in the guild. They tell her that he is training outside now, then hint at how to get to the required building ahead. Walking alone, following the directions, she suddenly got scared by a strange sound and noticed a bouncing ball nearby. She enters the room and sees a horribly wounded man curled up under the table and trembling. The wounded man screamed in agony, his body gripped by unbearable pain as crystals pierced through. Somewhere else, filled with Nelton fatigue, the sword plunged into the water. He was breathing heavily after a fierce battle. He doubted the outcome. He was not sure if his strike hit. During the fight, he was haunted by fragmented memories. His ability faded, confusion spread, and he feared that in a reckless strike he had gone too far. Suddenly Leonard appeared alive and delighted. He embraced Phil, admiring his incredible strength. Leonard staggered forward, praising Phil for his clever moves and ignoring the burning from a barely healed wound. He revealed his plan, showing how the depth of the river and its noise concealed his final advantage in positioning. While they pondered, quietly discussing how the terrain changes timing and visibility, especially when there is no water to hide movement. Leonard admitted he expected a trap. He was sure that he would try to snatch the sword in the middle of the attack. Laughter. Tension flared between them when he mocked the bold plan of Fildo to disarm him in the middle of the fight. He sat with shame, sincerely apologizing, and Leonard felt that the tension between them melted away. Leonard calmed him, reflecting on the purpose of their duel and assuring that Fildo had the potential to become a comrade. Fildo bitterly regretted losing control and admitted that his powers were meant to support, not harm those nearby. Surprised by Leonard's gesture, Fildo raised his eyes. The apology was uttered without hesitation and without judgment. He admitted his guilt because he felt Fildo reacted that way out of loyalty to the one he trusted. Fildo held back tears and forced himself not to break, thinking about the true importance of Leonasis. Leonasis appeared nearby and with a glance let him know that for Fildo she meant much more than just a companion. Suddenly another figure hit the ground with a dull thud, alarming everyone while Leonard was given a healing elixir. He hesitated with the explanation, recalling the moment when his calm mask barely concealed deep insecurity inside. To everyone's surprise, Leonard revealed the secret of his sword, the immortal sword, and he erased that wound. When the power of Durandal activated, the severed fingers instantly turned into a pair and began to regenerate right in the air. Confidently, he demonstrated complete healing, revealing the sword's ability to erase any injury. He explained that Durandal grants both resurrection and increased power, so it was perfectly suited for combat trials. Meanwhile, Leonasis anxiously recounted the recent discovery: a mighty creature was cut in half. Leonard connected a destructive pillar of light to those blades, and it confirmed his involvement in the incident. It turned out that he deliberately recruited Fildo because he knew that their swords were connected by a mysterious bond. A flash of memories revealed Leonard's past. He was pressured by others, but he insisted that Fildo's choice remain free. Leonasis declared himself neutral and plainly said that Fildo's decision in battle was entirely his own business. He chose patience, jokingly bought a potion, and earned praise for his unexpectedly kind nature. She solemnly stepped forward and introduced herself as the Sword Saint, implying that her goal was deeper than just healing, and Leonasis officially apologized for her previous behavior, and Leonard admitted that during the fight he used Fildo's strengths. Before he could respond, Leonasis suddenly promised to repay her debt, and this unexpected determination stunned him. He called her a benefactor, and others were embarrassed. Conflicting stories about their connections swirled in memory. Fildo, with tears in her eyes, explained that she fulfilled an old promise, and behind her angry devotion hid deep gratitude. He quietly thought that adventurers rarely get second chances. Wait too long, and you risk falling silent forever. Fildo bitterly realized that his confidence was an illusion. Victories over monsters had not prepared him for skillful human opponents. At that moment, he admitted to himself, a real fight would instantly cost him his life. Although he doubted his own growth, Leonard's sudden call pulled him out of deep thoughts. A terrible enemy appeared, and Fildo without hesitation rushed at the attacker, who was teeming with parasites. Leonasis rushed forward, gained acceleration, and hit the monster even before it could reach Fildo. He approached Claude and threatened retribution if he did not answer serious questions about his past involvement. She confessed she used a forbidden poison and killed the executive director of Light of Glory. Mention of the sword with the engraving Fildo's filled the air with a hint of something deeper, while others just laughed and dismissed it. Accusations poured in, saying she knowingly gave the sword away, even though she perfectly knew what it concealed. Leonard suddenly realized he had been kept in the dark, and this shocked him. She had hidden important information about Fildo from him. She mockingly laughed at them, recalling his power as the former Guildmaster, provoking a reaction from Fildo's ally Lena. Leonasis expressed her disappointment bitterly once she believed that Claude had the ambition to grow and leave his arrogance behind. As soon as she spoke about transferring guardianship, danger suddenly appeared behind Leonard and caught everyone by surprise. Claude without hesitation launched a sudden attack, forcing Leonasis to interrupt her speech mid-sentence and fend off the blow. He ominously revealed his plan: a deadly artifact will kill everyone, regardless of what they thought. Everyone froze when Claude activated the artifact. A towering structure rose above them, ominously piercing the sky. A huge black spire descended. It was a sign of disaster. The worst scenario was now becoming reality. A demonic dragon descended. Panic spread around. Fildo stood firm, shielding the frightened elven sisters behind him. The beast's call devastated the city. Tornadoes appeared instantly, a clear sign that destruction was already in full swing. Calculations failed. Fildo's face froze. He realized that this creature far exceeded the magical endurance threshold he had calculated. Two warriors lay fallen. Their quest for the truth about Fildo led them to death. Fildo burst out of the shattered earth. Energy flared around him. Someone shouted his name through trembling breaths. Through the broken stone, the enemy mocked him and revealed that he was Fildo's estranged older brother, feigning regret. The brother doubted in Fildo's heart and accused him of cruelty in cold upbringing. Fildo was silent. The words struck straight to the heart, and painful memories of the teachings of that twisted figure resurfaced. He responded not with emotions but with pure power. A mighty summoning declared that death makes no choice, it is the same for all. Even before the divine strike hit, another warrior, shocked, rushed forward, ready to cover him with his shield. When the debris fell and the beams struck the ground, Fildo's comrade dashed forward and barely avoided a deadly blow. Crushed and wounded, the rescuer groaned in pain. Blood flowed freely from the injured arm, still con. Regaining consciousness, he calmed Fildo. Although he knew he could handle it himself, he still intervened without hesitation. Leonard regained consciousness, though still healing slowly. He instantly warned them Bahamut, the summoned beast, was approaching. Fildo listened grimly. Bahamut, created for chaos, broke free from the sealed sanctuary and emerged to the surface. The skill of analysis revealed hidden power levels, but the levels were not always accurate. Some monsters easily masked their overwhelming might. He was shocked when it dawned on him. There was something fundamentally different about this encounter, and it chilled him to the bone. Bahamut hung huge and silent, and the status window showed level 200 beyond all known limits. In the darkness, eyes shone and countless pupils fixed on their position, watching every slightest movement. The mouth opened so wide it seemed larger than his entire body, and panic surged. Retreating already seemed too late. Pure terror overwhelmed him. Muscles froze, thoughts scattered. This was not instinct. It was a horror that became reality. Voices raced in his head. Survival, allies, hope, and none offered a way out of this overwhelming threat. A sudden clap interrupted the panic. Gloved palms met and he snapped out of the rising fear. Tension eased a little. One prayed, the other couldn't believe his eyes, watching as courage slowly replaced embarrassment. The slap landed softly. Relief rolled through. Shock receded. The enemy blinked, confused by this unexpected calm. Leonard handed him the artifact. The evacuation was completed. Only one task remained: to neutralize the threat. The necklace barely glowed in his palm. The ancient spell promised protection from the destructive magical influence. The tension melted away, muscles relaxed. That paralyzing pressure was artificially caused either by the fear of a high-level Bahamut or by Leonard's mere gaze. He left no time for hesitation, gave instructions, and went alone to face the inevitable confrontation. Dust rose around him and the smile appeared again before the deadly enemy. Leonard prepared to fight seriously. At last, from Bahamut's jaws burst forth the off-focused beam, tearing through the rock and smashing everything before it. Instead of retreating, he smiled sinisterly, and energy gathered in his eyes, ready for a counterattack. The armor scorched and the cloak trailed a burning tail. Leonard rushed forward, resolutely determined to close the distance instantly. Bahamut suddenly turned around, sensed danger. Magical rings ignited and rained down, intercepting attacks. Charge failed. Leonard crashed hard, enraged. Bahamut mocked, believing escape was impossible. Power exploded, his weapon Durandal activated, eyes stubbornly looking forward. One move and all stats were enhanced for maximum output. Dazzling assault began. Bahamut prepared too late, and the energy slash passed right through his wing. Despite the damage, the scales held firm. He gritted his teeth. The resistance struck him but did not break him. The course of the battle sharply changed. The blade flashed lightning fast, and Leonard pressed with all his might, aiming to completely break Bahamut's defense. His body battered, Bahamut staggered slightly. Continuous pressure opened cracks. Victory seemed real, until suddenly the light flared again. The strike hit precisely, but the armor absorbed most of the damage, and his facial expression tightened in irritated disbelief. Bahamut instantly responded. His tail whipped the stone, and from this burst an explosion that engulfed the impact site, and the smoke dispersed. Leonard and his sword were pinned down. Heat and pressure quickly cracked the debris around. When Glant raised his eyes, charged spheres appeared above. One mistake left him vulnerable, and he held his breath. Options vanished, a burst of energy lunged at him, escape became impossible, everything blurred into light and power. The shard shattered as Fildo stepped forward, the barrier sparkled, and he took the blow meant for Leonard. Irritation grew, orders were not followed, yet this reckless act awakened something completely unexpected in the veteran. The rumor spread instantly, Fildo apologized and stubbornly stayed standing aside was no longer an option. Confidence radiated from him, the wounds seemed non-existent, and he assured Leonard that he would not break under pressure. Two swords raised, one goal. Together they prepare to overthrow the strongest enemy still alive. The legendary dragon appears. Fildo joins the knight in armor, preparing for a deadly mission of extermination. People rush through the crumbling streets, and Miguel leads the crowd, guiding the survivors away from the dragon's wrath. Suddenly, debris rained down with a roar from above, screams rose around, and panic spread through the densely packed alleys. Miguel rushed forward, shielding a child. The wizard prepares magic, holding back the enemy's devastating advance. As chaos grows, they ask who this dragon is. Suspicions fall on Bahamut, their most terrible nightmare. Smoke billows, Miguel looks at the burning ruins. Orders are clear, evacuate first, then await results. Among broken stones, the priestess coughs. Nearby, her companion is unconscious, buried under the rubble. Recognizing her sister in the fallen warrior, the priestess rushes forward, panic gripping her chest. The clang of steel, the knight charges forward, and each of his strikes distracts the dragon from the fleeing civilians behind. The dragon roars fiercely. The brave fighter swoops down from above, the blade drawn for a deadly strike. Clenching his teeth, Fildo lunges at the enemy force, wild power combined with flawless swordsmanship. The dragon instantly counterattacks, wounds vanish before their eyes, healing faster than they can strike. The dragon instantly counterattacks, wounds vanish before their eyes, healing faster than they. Laughter hides the anxiety as they realize the monster is recovering, but there must be a weak spot on top. Destruction spreads, they are handed the last healing potion, their only hope left. When the order suddenly changed and those forces rapidly filled the field, strength proved to be the key. While the ally aimed at the wings, he needed to hit the very core. Flames burst from the rubble. Fildo, sword in hand, shouted Illumina and charged through the collapsing terrain. A radiant barrier unfolds widely. Lily's veil activates and covers the allies with divine light, protecting them from the approaching destruction. Despite the spell's power, the pressure mounts. Lily strains, struggling to hold the defensive wall above. Fildo shouts a warning. The explosion strikes with full force, shattering the ground beneath their feet. The pilot drank briefly, settled down. The comrade staggered forward and assured Fildo that he would survive, although the danger was clearly still looming. Bahamut hovers over the shattered battlefield. Fildo suddenly realizes he must instantly take off and reach his position. Returning to the priestess, he imploringly asks her to summon the wind magic so that she can lift them to Bahamut's height as quickly as possible. The wind howls beneath them. As they rise into the sky, the aerial battle panic rise was never part of the plan. Empowered by spells, the knight bursts upward. The dragon waits, coiling power behind its wings. The blade strike landed but barely scratched. Bahamut scales deflects attacks, so the only option is to aim at the core from below. The priestess directs energy into the sky. Her body trembles, but her resolve remains unshakable. Suddenly, a sinister force paralyses her. Horror instantly flashes in her eyes. The magic hangs mid-spell under pressure, and above Fildo and Knight Steger, the dragon's aura radiates a powerful fear effect. The knight calls with anxiety. Their attacks are failing. Bahamut's defense is too strong. Fear spreads like poison. The priestess's hands tremble wildly. Her will nearly breaks under the invisible weight. Magic whirls out of control. A wave of explosion rolls across the battlefield, scattering focus and destroying ranks. Smoke tears through Leonard's armor. He collapsed among the ruins and is barely breathing, wounded and defenseless beneath the cliffs. From the other edge of the field comes a scream. The priestess screams, and shock with fear grips her trembling heart. Emerging from the crater, Bahamut advances. Fildo lies stunned below, eyes fixed on inevitable death. Power returns in an instant. Fildo clenches his fist and fires upward while debris flies around him. Bahamut lunged forward, jaws wide open. Fildo barely dodged, trapped between rubble and the crushing claws of the dragon. Eyes locked on Fildo and Bahamut, and the priestess shouted his name. She feared she was about to witness death. She emerges from behind. Armored knight attacks. Her strike flashes with dazzling light, piercing Bahamut's flank with divine power. Wounded, she falls forward. The younger sister bursts inside, watching as corruption swirls around Bahamut. Spheres of dark energy spun and flew outward. The name Lily stuck in her sister's throat. Something is wrong. Explosions fiercely tear the broken earth. The priestess is thrown back, defenseless and vulnerable. Through tears she shouts, her sister falls, and Bahamut grows stronger, absorbing the dark energy. Without hesitation, full of energy, Fildo lunged forward, jumping between the dragon and the sacrificial victim, shielding her from the approaching explosion and holding her tightly. He withstands the blow. The light fades behind a veil of debris. She whispers his name. Fildo lands hard, covered in blood, but holds on. "Don't speak," he murmurs quietly. In Fildo's embrace, the knight barely smiles. He uses magic to soothe the pain. She apologizes for her failure. Fildo, despite his wounds, instead applies a potion to her. He rises again and grips the sword despite fatigue. Fildo finally sees a chance to win. The sky split in half as the enemy descended. Illumina froze, blaming herself for everything. Crushed by defeat, she fell, regret burning deep, futile for her sister too. To master Fildo ran in and grabbed Illumina, her apology cut off as he begged her not to give up and to keep fighting. Their chance finally came. The sacrifice of Lunesis revealed a weak spot. The shadows shifted. The monster staggered, finally vulnerable. Fildo shouted decisively, "One last push remains. Together they will end this, no matter what happens." That devastating blow shattered the creature's armor and finally exposed the vulnerable spot beneath its chest. Without hesitation, Fildo lunged upward, sword ready, closing the distance before the monster could react. Landing precisely, he crouched low and barely dodged the explosion while the smoke concealed the beast's rage. The enemy launched a powerful attack. Leonard rushed forward, calling Fildo and quickly assessing the pause before it. Leonard demanded a swift strategy, urgency blazing in his eyes. The fight would not stop. With fury in his voice, Fildo shouted that he would completely destroy the monster's head. Leonard charged forward without hesitation. His voice steady, he promised to personally back up Fildo in the final strike. The others retreated, trusting Fildo. He aligned his aim, pushed fear aside, and thought only of the target, beaten but unyielding. He urged Fildo to unleash everything, this time no restraints. The enemy rose again, eyes narrowed, and aimed. He would not let him slip away a second time. Illumina stepped forward, no longer allowing herself to be deceived. Her grip tightened and her eyes blazed with determination. Winds swirled around her, memories awakened, and her strength, once uncertain, now blossomed through shared experience. A storm of petals and blades erupted. Illumina's magic propelled Fildo toward their enemy in the sky. Her level soared rapidly as power broke free. Illumina was no longer just support, she became the very force itself. Tears rolled down, but her fear disappeared. She screamed confidently, rushed forward, magic blazing as a sign of defiance. The beast's eyes opened wide in shock as razor-sharp vines pierced its armored body from all sides. The winds tore around them and Fildo broke through the whirlwind, striking quickly before the creature could recover. Leonard burst into the fight, rose into the air, and launched an attack from above while his comrades kept the monster occupied below. His strike failed. The enemy sneered mockingly, blood dripping. Leonard tensed and pain instantly struck him. An explosive counterattack flared, dust and heat engulfed everything, and no one knew if anyone survived the blast. Leonard madly charged forward, laughing through the pain. Wounded, he forced himself to become unnecessary bait. Sword held high, Fildo descended through the storm, ready to end everything with one final strike. Having figured out the previous attacks, Fildo calculated the weak spot hidden near the monster's glowing throat. He struck with all his might, shouting confidently. The enemy's core finally pulsed, exposed and vulnerable. Everyone watched. A suffocating silence hung, the ruins shifted, and Illumina whispered. No one knew if Fildo's last strike succeeded. A crack opened beneath his feet as the cloaked warrior raised his blade for the decisive blow. The monster laughed mockingly, unaware that the attack had already exposed a weak point in its defense. Despite the blood and fatigue, the team's efforts opened a crack, albeit barely noticeable. Without hesitation, he struck the weak spot again, shouting with all his might. Shards exploded outward with a loud blast. The core trembled under the pressure. Fildo's facial expression hardened. He prepared for the final blow. The pressure intensified, but the blade could not cut deeply enough. The energy scattered from the strike. Bahamut recoiled, head screamed in pain. The counterattack grew and once again pushed them apart. Confusion spread around. There was too little magical energy, and his last move was still out of reach. The explanation came quickly. Holy Breaker required power. They had not yet had to guarantee a clean finish. Bahamut's core remained visible but stable, so now there was only one option left, to weaken it even more. Shards flew as shockwaves hit the ground, and everyone ducked, reacting just in time to survive. Retreat seemed wise, but hesitation vanished instantly. The monster charged forward and let out another deafening roar. Energy burst upward, he jumped up with his weapon in hand and poured all his strength into one final downward strike. The blade trembled under pressure, the resistance grew, he clenched his teeth, resolutely not letting go of the grip. Confidence wavered, although with disgust at having to rely on someone else's strength, there was no other choice left. Reluctantly, he raised his hand, the final energy shot upward. This technique was always forbidden. Confused glances rose to the sky, and a wave of energy surged over the allies, shaking everything from the ruins of the battlefield to distant cities. Thousands of lives of experience burst into the sky and were directed entirely at one single warrior. Snow. Around his body, light sparks swirled. Whole chaos began the moment Bahamut awoke. Above him, the sky split, power broke free, his indicators soared rapid. Life legend began exactly where the ruin almost put an end. Everything came down to this final strike. The sword lunged forward, aiming directly at Bahamut's exposed core. Dust choked the air as a gigantic crater swallowed half the city, and from the walls, a soldier looked in horror. His thoughts were fixed on the ruins where his family once lived. The guards nearby gathered their courage, forcing themselves to be brave as an unknown force crept ever closer. The strongest warrior in the country was their last hope for defense. Suddenly, the sky tore apart. A dark mass hit the fortress, debris scattered around, and the ground shook beneath them. Among the ruins, the creature writhed in pain. Its power was felt in every movement. No one had yet managed to recover when it lunged forward again. The soldiers retreated, hearts pounding, for the roar foretold a new wave of destruction. A shadow flashed over the battlefield as a lone figure landed on the back of a huge creature. The impact scattered dust and debris, and the battle felt a turning point. Far beyond the walls, the earth trembled and the kingdom froze, finally realizing the power of the force that had awakened. This creature was known as Bahamut, an ancient dragon who, over 1,000 years ago, reshaped continents and destroyed states. Now the fierce battle reached its finale. Wings tore through the sky, slicing clouds with unstoppable energy. Yet despite all its power, the mighty dragon trembled in fear before one man. The dragon trembled as the blade passed through its dark scales. It was not fear of death, but recognition. And suddenly memories from ancient times surfaced within it. It recalled the man who once sealed it, holding in his hands the very same sacred sword Excalibur. From the sky burst a dazzling light that cut through the clouds and darkness and announced the awakening of a forgotten power. The dragon roared, wildly thrashing. The earth cracked beneath its waves. Through the fading smoke emerged a lone figure, calm, unshakable, and ready to end the battle once again. Fildo hit the ground, his body broken and aching from the fall. Air was knocked from his chest as he, gasping, tried to move amid the rising dust. Lying flat on his back, he realized that somehow he had survived. Haynes sprawled on his back, and the relief of being alive calmed his breathing. He had not yet recovered when a huge shadow fell over him. The dragon rose, its claws tearing the ground again. The earth trembled as Fildo forced himself to stand, his strength fading with every breath. Looking up, he froze under the massive jaws of the creature, fangs already looming, ready to sink in. The earth split with a rumble, and lightning shot through the cracks. Fildo's body tensed as the force spread in waves and shook the battlefield. From the chaos emerged a silhouette in shining armor and struck the dragon with an incredible force that echoed through the air. Knight boldly moved forward, his weapon gleamed. His strength matched the fury of the creature, but in his calm eyes was the experience that could not be measured. Looking closely, the knight recognized the same light from ancient times and suddenly understood. Fildo's ability, the power of the point giver, was undeniable. The dragon's voice rumbled dully through the ruins, filled with hatred. The knight clenched his blade, sensing the end of the revived ancient enmity. The last words of the dragon rolled across the battlefield, filled with rage. The blood of the traitor's kin hissed a vow of revenge before its form dissolved into darkness. After the monster fell, silence ensued. Leonard froze, watching the fading shadows and unsure if the danger was truly over, while nearby Fildo collapsed, beaten and bleeding. Comrades rushed to him, relief mixed with panic when they saw he was breathing but seriously wounded. After a brief examination, the knight reassured them. Fildo's life was not in danger, although his endurance was almost superhuman. Resolutely, Leonard lifted Fildo onto his shoulder, already dreading having to recount this battle. When the air filled with tension, the elf woman stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. She asked Leonard to entrust Fildo to her care and insisted that they must leave the country immediately. To Leonard, Fildo was a hero to be celebrated, not hidden. Recognition seemed a worthy reward for the one who killed the dragon. She warned, fame could turn into danger instead of a savior. He might be called a threat. Leonard gripped his weapon tighter, defiance flashing in his eyes, while the elf woman, with a quiet, impassive smile, questioned his resolve. Without hesitation, she drew her blade, a sign that words had failed, and only strength would decide Fildo's fate. Leonard stunned everyone by agreeing without hesitation. With a sly smile, he handed over Fildo, and the elf was momentarily speechless at such unexpected consent. Grateful but worried, she thanked him and promised to report everything to the king. Nearby, their companion muttered about endless paperwork awaiting him once the dragon matter reached the capital. As they prepared to depart, Leonard could not stop thinking about Fildo's mysterious gift, the ability to distribute and amplify experience points. Even the elf acknowledged the truth. Such an ability, if unchecked, could reshape entire nations. The very thought sowed anxiety within the group. Despite their fears, Leonard dismissed the worry with a calm smile. Leonard stood before the ruined fortress, his cloak fluttering in the wind, and with quiet confidence he said that someday Fildo would go in search of the silver blade. Meanwhile, Fildo's companion gently pressed him and promised not to interfere with his choice. Whatever path he chose, she would respect it. Before Leonard's departure, one of Fildo's allies shouted and handed over a small object she had kept during the battle. The knight's gaze softened when he recognized it, a necklace that drives away evil, a powerful talisman against darkness. He stubbornly refused to take it back, insisting that it belonged to Fildo. Leonard sighed with a tired smile, already anticipating the questions that awaited him at the royal court, and said, as his team prepared to set out, a new record began to unfold: the year 1332, according to the royal calendar. Although the attack caused panic, the damage was limited. The destruction from the dragon did not extend beyond the training grounds, so the city avoided total ruin. After that, Leonard and the Silver Blades were honored for their bravery. Their names echoed through the palace corridors as the country celebrated their victory. But behind the joy of victory remained one mystery: the man accused of summoning the Glamatics with Bahamut's claws vanished without a trace. Military confirmed. In the chaos, Bahamut broke through the city walls. Witnesses swore that on the back of the dragon, descending on the capital, rode a human figure. Rumors spread quickly, but no one could prove the truth, so the event itself remained in a fog of doubt. After the incident with Bahamut, rumors spread throughout the Elven Kingdom that the princess had returned safe and sound. People whispered about Fildo's involvement and even speculated that he might be a candidate for the royal title. Whispers filled the palace halls as a figure calmly approached, drawing the attention of the courtiers. Smiles returned to the palace. The princess reconciled with the king, and the servants sighed with relief at her return. In a quiet room, someone was reading ancient texts, and tea was served elegantly, with refined courtesy. Fildo sat calmly, reading and drinking tea with a quiet smile. His presence was now welcome. They brought me a cup of tea brewed from herbs that grew near the roots of the manatee, herbs famed for helping the body recover faster. He took a sip and felt a faint sweetness. The elf explained that the taste and effect change depending on how it is prepared. The book nearby caught his eye. Interested, he picked up the book. It had Elven script, something completely unfamiliar to him, and the assistant explained that it was an old tale once read by his mother. The elf was noticeably confused and did not know how to respond to the awkward silence. Quietly reflecting, Fildo became even more thoughtful. Memories of past journeys and elven stories surfaced in his mind. Waldesat was silent while the elf hesitated to ask about his time in the guild. He had never shared those memories. The elf nervously tried to speak but quickly withdrew, saying that her story was not important. Thoughts were swirling in both heads. Fildo was silent, and she recalled the advice about unspoken pain and when it is better to speak. When Fildo remembered his first sword, the elf instantly recognized it as a guild badge. Such were given to identify new adventurers. She explained that the matter was deeper. It was an official weapon, marked to prevent enemy guilds from conducting unwanted reconnaissance. Lunasis looked puzzled upon learning that Fildo might not have truly been exiled, but rather it seemed they expected him to eventually return. While Fildo pondered the guild's mistake, Lunasis finally confessed her goals, revealing how Rush's decisions shaped their paths. He lowered his gaze and quietly responded to her name while the tension still hung in the room. Deciding to act, Fildo announced that he was going to the Silver Blade, tormented by the thought of what else he could have done. Although grateful for the time spent together, he insisted that Lunas had already fulfilled her purpose and decided that she should not follow him further. Lunasis agreed with Fildo's choice to end their journey, but she asked permission to pose one last question. The decision froze at her calm response. Fildo was asked whether this decision truly came from his heart. She asked, was it his own will, or did the burden of power force him to act this way? Even before he could answer, she pressed further. Did he just want someone else to bear that burden? Confused, Fildo tried to respond, but Luna explained that she was not blaming him, she simply could not find the words to express her true feelings. Looney's gently reminded Fildo of his words that he wanted to live freely, not be bound by his own power. She sat beside him and gently encouraged him, saying that he could lean on others if he was still unsure of his path. She smiled warmly and reminded him that in adventures she was the elder. A sudden knock on the door interrupted their moment. Elven servants politely invited Fildo to a meeting with the royal personage, and a light tension immediately hung in the air. Then misunderstandings quickly flared, those present giggled, and Fildo panicked and rushed to explain something. The handmaidens anxiously announced the royal summons, and Rose, overwhelmed with emotion and grateful for how the princess had grown, rushed to perform her duties, while Fildo and Lunasis were also moved by the moment. Although Lunasis wanted to go with him, the servants insisted she rest, and she quietly agreed, leaving Fildo a long look as he went to the summons. Through the grand halls he was led, and Fildo walked cautiously to the royal chamber, repeating to himself all the time, "Stay calm, you must be composed before the king." When he arrived, he was officially introduced, the doors creaked, and tension rose as he stepped forward. Inside, preparations were already underway. Servants, dressed and focused, turned to greet him and said they had been waiting and were ready to begin. The Elven King asked Fildo to remove his clothes, and the embarrassed and awkward Fildo froze in hesitation while the impatient servants looked at him with sparkling eyes. Fulfilling the request, he bared his shoulder and showed secret signs. The king, intrigued, carefully studied their patterns. As the signs became more noticeable, the king began preparing his spell. Runes swirled on his hand, revealing a powerful enchantment. He noticed something in Fildo's body that resembled a curse. Despite years of experience, this magic was unfamiliar to him. Although the spreading briefly stopped, the king frankly admitted the curse needed more time to be unraveled and advised Fildo to use protective items if the symptoms worsened. The king enthusiastically explained a complex magical theory, overwhelming Fildo with a dense avalanche of information. When Fildo was changing clothes, the conversation had already shifted to the distribution of mana. Restoring power was simple, but imagining it and redirecting it was much more difficult even for the king. Fildo recalled those huge experience points from Bahamut and how his skill multiplied them to absurd amounts, causing them to accumulate uncontrollably. Finding no safer place to tame his powers, he turned to the elves, those who could deal with the mysterious condition of his hand. But a dark presence stirred, and a voice whispered whether Fildo, having such power, truly wanted to help others rather than use it for revenge. Fildo stood firm and declared that he did not seek revenge. His voice was calm but unwavering. The Elven King listened quietly, and it reminded him that giving such a powerful sword to a human was a sign of deep trust he wanted to honor. Fully trusting the elves, Fildo offered to give them his experience points because he was sure they would manage them wisely. The king, moved by this sincerity, took his hand. When their palms touched, the room was instantly flooded with dazzling light, thus began their joint pact. Startled by the sudden glow, the servant rushed to explain that it was just a side effect of the magical necklace. Suspicion crept into Fildo when he felt something strange. Barely noticeable movements made him wonder why no one had reacted earlier. His head spun, and as soon as he recalled the untouched food served earlier, the thought struck him, and from anxiety he began to sweat. Somewhere warriors were talking about how food offerings often revealed the true intentions of rulers when something was considered important for the nation. Even the subtlest tricks were used. Lunasis, embarrassed and breathless, confusedly sought an excuse and hinted that she felt responsibility, indirectly pointing to the bond growing between them. Fildo panicked, quickly apologized, and ran out of the room, leaving the others stunned and shouting that he would return soon. The king felt that something was wrong and gave orders when Fildo suddenly rushed out of the hall. Before he could escape, several elves grabbed him mid-jump, trying to hold him back. While Fildo shouted in confusion, the king calmly announced him as the honorary fiancé, who should be accepted with care. There Fildo rushes down the corridor. Behind him, a dazzling light explodes, echoed by screams, and tension is visible on his face. He senses the approaching danger. Suddenly he slips on the floor, loses balance, his eyes wide open. He prepares for the blow and in a moment falls harshly to the floor. When the dust settled, he found himself on the floor, surrounded by a crowd of enchanted elf women who rushed to him with eyes full of hearts. Panic displaces confusion as countless hands reach out to him. He tries to break free, overwhelmed by this sudden attention. Somewhere else an elf silently watches, sipping from a cup as if indifferent to the chaos unfolding nearby. Trapped in a frenzy of disorder, Fildo is pressed down by grasping hands. Panic is visible on his face. He is suffocating. Voices echo around him, whispers about the crown, duty, and prophecy, and his body is pulled through the increasingly swaying crowd. Without any warning, magical beams cut through the corridor, scattering the crowd and instantly breaking the chase. Seizing the chance, Fildo along with several others rushes away, dashing forward while chaos explodes behind them. One misstep flips him in the air, leaving him stunned moments before falling back into the chaos. In the corridor, Fildo sharply turns, fleeing from pursuers, and one of them sees him, face twisted with wild excitement. Down another corridor, others bustle, searching, confused and unsure if he passed here, and doubts spread, so the group disperses. Next to him, Fildo climbs a ladder to slip away unnoticed, and a fellow elf prepares to help, carefully scanning the surroundings. They step onto an elevation hidden behind the buildings. The elf peeks over the edge, and Fildo looks at her with a tense, watchful gaze. With heavy breathing, they stop to catch their breath. Suddenly it occurs to him that he left an important thing behind, but retreating now is not an option. The elf, irritably grabbing Fildo, scolded him. Fildo defended himself, saying he received nothing from the king. Fildo, trying to downplay the situation, wiped his face and answered awkwardly. The elf remained uncertain and began to doubt his experience. Fildo explained that at that time his diet was limited to only soup and bread, and the elf listened attentively, surprised at how long he lived like that. Another guild bought him out, and under the leadership of a man named Claude, he trained until that guild disbanded. Finally, he joined a new team, and when his unique ability manifested, his path sharply turned toward the goal of joining the best guilds. The three stand before the guild recruiter and listen carefully to him. He explains that their current guild is little different from others at the very beginning. Confusion hung in the air, and the group wonders why they are approached, pointing out their shortcomings: lack of strength, deteriorating condition, and past rejections. Despite doubts, the man stubbornly insists that he values experience and believes they still have potential worth exploring. The recruiter extends an offer. He invites them to his guild and has already prepared suitable tasks for them. Later, they found themselves in battle together for the first time, instantly rushing toward the approaching threat. The squad rushes into battle, the knight blocks the enemy's attack, and the priest from the rear prepares magical aid. Calling out to Fildo, the priest begs him to stay away from the danger zone. He hesitates but still obeys. When the enemy begins to crack under pressure, the group feels they are working better than usual, and their coordination has become smoother than before. While Fildo calmly rests nearby, he is bombarded with system messages. All levels rapidly increase thanks to his hidden support skill. Later, their leader joyfully praises the result and suggests officially securing the team's role with a formal contract. Fildo imagines the hidden land of elves, which is said to have once connected with the realm of the world tree, and this thought deeply captivates him. Inspired by becoming stronger, comrades suggest someday embarking together on even bolder adventures. Their friendship grows stronger. The experienced elder lifted Fildo in his arms, praising him and promising that as soon as he is ready they will go hunting dragons. The guild laughs, everyone's mood is uplifted. With permission in hand, he prepares for the long-dreamed journey, determined to see the legends with his own eyes. Reaching level 20, he rushed to share the news, carried by the motivation and trust of those who believe in him. Fildo met again with his comrade, who brought news of a new task to tame a monster, but it is a slightly higher rank than their level. The team joyfully celebrates Fildo's promotion, which now opens the path to distant missions for him. This success lifts everyone's spirits too. Although still a bit nervous, the group quickly cheered up and with new confidence united to prepare for the next journey. Before setting off, the leader gives the final orders. When the door quietly closed behind those who were leaving, he silently hoped they would return safe and sound. Alone with his thoughts, he realizes all he truly wanted was for none of them to die. Then Fildo looks ahead, stunned by surprise. His eyes widen and the screen around him distorts. His team significantly levels up, each becomes stronger. He watches silently, uncertain. When his status appeared, it turned out he had fallen to level 1, and the others, puzzled and disappointed, were sure he had lied about his progress. Although they failed, the group still returned home safely. Friends greeted them with relief and surprise. One of the teammates, bandaged but smiling, gently greets Fildo. He is initially surprised, but her warm reaction quickly calms him. The guildmaster calls Fildo for a private conversation and sternly scolds him for distributing experience points without permission, warning that it could disrupt the party's balance. He explains how important it is to properly manage experience exchange and from now on takes control over how it is distributed. When Fildo is transferred to another group, some welcome him warmly, while others grumble or mock him. Guildmaster loudly announces, leftover experience from missions will now go directly to the core team. He says that it is much more effective to level up proven fighters than to lend to such an experienced orphan as Vildo. Vildo was accused and insulted for putting himself above other adventurers, and these words stunned him. He fell silent. Outside, whispers grow louder. Other adventurers mock him, pretending to envy his rapid level-ups, but in reality, they harshly ridicule his situation. He runs through the streets and people do not stop condemning him. Rumors spread that he is still stuck at level 1 and cannot grow. The old tormentors laugh again, confident that he will not break out of this circle. He avoids conflict and quietly climbs the stairs alone. Collapsing onto the bed, he looks at the ceiling and wonders if this miserable life will ever truly change. Bildo fell onto the bed, angry and humiliated by the insults, calling him an uneducated orphan. As he was venting, strange letters suddenly appeared on his interface, and puzzled, he leaned closer to read them. A new skill called Recovery appeared. He froze, staring at it. He did not understand what it was for, but he was ready.